Simone?
Thank you, everyone. And I will high level walk through the agenda for the next 2 days. We have coming up the tri-party agreement agency updates to be presented by Brian Vance, David Bowen, and David Enan. Welcome. Then we will have a hard stop at 10:45 for public comment. And then at 11:15, we will have a round robin topic for board members on providing your perspectives on what was an experience or insight that shapes your values and how you lead. So got some time to think about that. And then we will have do the HAB group photo and break for lunch. And then in the afternoon, we will be working on the draft advice for the fiscal year 26 cleanup priorities. And then we'll adjourn. We will cut the cake and celebrate the cake here. And then at 5 p.m., we'll regroup over at Tigueris and eat, drink, and be merry and have a real party. So that's today. And then tomorrow, we will open the meeting, and then we will continue working on the draft advice and hopefully reach consensus on the cleanup priorities advice. Hard stop at 10:15 for public comment, and then at 10:45 have the overview of the TPA, CERCLA, and RECRA. And then in the afternoon, committee updates and HAB business, and we will get status on updates of previous action items. So it's a full couple of days. I think, and does anyone have any announcements or anything they need to bring forward? If that's the case, then we're a couple of minutes ahead of schedule and we'll move on to the updates.
The meeting logistics. In the highly unlikely event that we would need to evacuate, these 4 doors on the wall opposite here all lead directly to the outside, and we would proceed outside and meet by the covered bus stop directly to the east. Inside, restrooms are to this corner. Probably the most direct route is through that last exit door. The meeting is being recorded. We do have coffee, tea, refreshments. You'll notice that the cake, it's a Kahlua cake, became one with the cake box, so the decor is now abstract impressionism, but we hope it'll work just fine. And for the ground rules, I know that we often go through the ground rules. It's almost rote at this point. The reason for having a collaborative planning process is to have a space where people feel safe, you've heard that word before, to voice their ideas, share their ideas, and equally important, to change ideas. As people hear new information from presentations, from other HAB members, from their constituencies, ideas can evolve, and that is the reason for ground rules. And the most important is really active listening. Listen and speak to share information. Please honor the direction of the chair and the facilitator, especially when it comes to meeting cues. We don't always get the order exactly right, but it's to make sure that everybody has a chance to be heard. Be respectful of different opinions. Also, something I often get dinged on, please set your phones to silent. And if you need to take a call, step outside and reduce side conversations. And with that, make yourself comfortable. We do have scheduled breaks, but if you have to get up to leave, please do so. And with that, I believe that we are ready to go.
Mr. Vance, you're up.
Thanks. I didn't want to start talking till you said it was okay. So, as always, I appreciate the opportunity to be here today. The department and our contractor teammates have really gotten off to a good start in 2024. though we always start with a very deliberate return to work, given the holidays, to get everybody back into a sort of a site safety mindset. And we had a little bit of weather in January that slowed us down on a couple fronts, but overall, really good progress and a really safe and effective start. There'll be a package of pictures that we put out later in the meeting that shows some of the recent accomplishments. And as always, I'll be happy to answer questions about specific projects and activities during Q&A. But today, in recognition of the 30-year anniversary of the HAB, I'll deviate from my typical progress update and spend my time talking about the important role that the Hanford Advisory Board can play in support of the Department of Energy cleanup mission here at Hanford. At the last meeting, there was a reading of some excerpts from the 1994 speech by John Wagner, the site manager when the HAB was originally formed. And while interesting from a historical perspective, times have changed. And I think it's important to highlight the very significant differences between the Hanford at that time, the Hanford site of today, and more importantly, the Hanford site we're working to shape in the future. So the first and most obvious difference relative to the 1994 speech was the site had just transitioned from a 45-year national security mission that had been veiled in nearly total secrecy. Public involvement was a new concept relative to the Hanford site, really still in its infancy. The Hanford cleanup effort, including the size, scope, cost, complexity, technologies, regulatory framework, funding expectations, and a broad range of other challenges that would be faced in the largest environmental cleanup of its kind in the country were not understood. There were references in the remarks to a federal budget process of that time, which has now been fundamentally changed by national policy level decisions over the last 30 years. And our site, our Tri-Cities community, our region, our nation have all fundamentally changed since 1994 in far too many ways for me to spend the time to describe in my few minutes today. But despite those very significant differences from 1994, there were a number of elements of that speech that remain true and important today. The department, now with our tri-party colleagues operating under a 2008 agreement, continue to look to the HAB to bring forward perspectives and inputs from our diverse community to assist us in making the best possible decisions in the challenging environment in which we operate. Outreach was highlighted as important in 1994, and that remains true today. Beyond our continued support of the Hanford Advisory Board, we consistently execute a broad range of engagement activities through our Speakers Bureau events, our Tribal Affairs Program activities, our routine engagement to the state of Oregon through the Oregon Hanford Cleanup Board, frequent and routine engagements with our local community through Hanford Communities and TRIDEC, our extensive effort to host site visits with local, state, regional, and national government elected officials, and our participation in regional and national conferences, and many, many more activities that are beyond the time that I could describe. The department also continues to materially support the HAB with funding and administration by our DDFO and other members of our Hanford team. And further, the Department of Energy and our contractor partners consistently provide routine updates on a wide variety of issues to assist the HAB members in maintaining an appropriate level of situational awareness to do your important work. Wagner recognized in his remarks that the HAB should not attempt to become a technical advisor to the site. That perspective remains true today, also extending to other roles that are already formed or already performed by trained and qualified professionals, such as regulatory oversight, operational oversight, and inherently governmental activities such as contracting, commercial, and budget activities. Further, and while we remain committed to seeking advice, Wagner recognized that we would not be able to implement some of that advice for a wide variety of reasons that at this point in the cleanup are much clearer understood than in 1994 when he made his original remarks. The specific quote, "The HAB should not expect, nor could I," Wagner, "allow the board to make decisions for me. DOE has the responsibility and authority to make decisions, and we are uniquely accountable for the decisions we make, the work we cause to be done at Hanford, and the risk consequences of those choices to our workforce and our community." Finally, Wagner stated, "These are new times, and new times call for new approaches." I couldn't agree more. And your focus today and really should be on the future, not looking backwards to 1994. As we recognize the HAB's first 30 years as a theme, I hope today's HAB membership embraces a unique and important opportunity to work together to shape the HAB of the next 30 years. The operating framework established by the Federal Advisory Committee Act, under which the HAB operates, provides valuable insights and expectations. The role of the Hanford Advisory Board, or federal advisory boards in general, is summarized as follows. Through the ability to leverage the perspectives of advisory committee members, federal officials in the nation have access to information and advice on a broad range of issues affecting federal policies and programs. The public, in return, is afforded an opportunity to provide input into a process that may form the basis for government decisions. Further, the operating framework states that advice should be provided that is relevant, objective, and open to the public. The board should act promptly to complete their work and comply with reasonable cost controls and record keeping. The mission of the HAB is to deliver consensus policy level advice as a means of assisting the department in shaping positive outcomes in the complex mission that we are committed to progress. Speaking for myself, the most valuable input the HAB provides is the annual priority advice. That input is vital as we strive to apply limited funding in the most effective way to optimize reduction of risk reduction per dollar in our fiscally constrained environment, and strive to create the safest achievable workplace for our workforce and protect our community as we execute the mission to clean up the environment. There's very real value in priority inputs, including when the inputs don't match our own, by stimulating an important dialogue as we seek to understand the differences and strive to achieve as much alignment as possible across a very broad range of diverse perspectives and interests. Our objective to gain broad alignment in support of our work is critical because when the majority of those interested in our work see the progress and express support, even if not perfectly aligned with their individual perspectives, that support translates into congressional funding, which makes continued progress possible. I think we acknowledge and appreciate the challenge that the HAB has faced over the last several years. The pandemic made engagements and communications very difficult. And while I think we can be proud of the fact that the HAB continued to operate when many boards across the country did not, there were impacts to the HAB that we all experienced during that challenging time. The implementation of term limits, the right thing to do in recognition of the need for the HAB to be representative of our Hanford community, introduced new people and new perspectives that impacted the manner in which the board had functioned for a decade or more. There were also leadership changes on the HAB, not only the HAB itself, but also our DDFO, which introduced changes to the board dynamic and the culture. Further, there are a few cultural or a few structural issues unique to the HAB among the FACA boards that contribute to complexity and challenge. At more than 30 primary members, the size of the HAB can represent a challenge to efficiently and effectively arrive at consensus advice. Alternate members treated as primary members add additional and often independent perspectives, adding further complexity in efficiently reaching consensus. And finally, not all the positions have alternates, creating a potential imbalance in representation that can impact the free exchange of equally valid perspectives, which is a foundational element of the value proposition that citizens boards represent. The resulting inefficiencies and challenges can, I think, have led to frustration and a board dynamic that impedes the value the citizens boards are capable of delivering for the federal activities and constituents that they serve. So as we look to the future and we think about our opportunity to work together to build the HAB of the next 30 years, the Wagner quote, again, for me, is very relevant. These are new times, and new times call for new approaches. So I have a few aspirations for each of you that I'd like to share. I hope that you'll work together to establish a positive and constructive working environment by striving to respect each other and the valid but often diverse perspectives that you each bring to the table, being especially open to those perspectives that may not be your own. I hope that you will commit to maintaining a respectful environment for those presenting material and information to the HAB, so the discussions can focus in an environment of civility and that support open and frank discussions on challenging issues that we face in our work at Hanford. I hope that you will spend more time with the constituents you each represent and work to expand and enhance interest and awareness of our work. And I hope you'll strive beyond the individual interests that you each may represent to see the site as we have to, a single very complex undertaking in a resource-constrained environment to help us successfully navigate the inherent challenges of our cleanup mission. My final hope, as you begin your next 30 years of service, I hope you'll renew your commitment to partnership, not only internal to the HAB, but also with the agencies you serve as members of the HAB and the constituents you represent. I believe that our focus on partnership has been a key element of the transformation we're leading at Hanford as we prepare to write the next chapter of our cleanup history. We're committed to strengthening partnerships with and between our contractor partners, with our regulators, with our community leaders and businesses, with our state and regional representatives, with tribal nations, with the congressional staff, and with other groups and organizations that have a connection to our important work at Hanford. We're also committed to partnership with the Hanford Advisory Board, a citizens board made up of members who understand their important duties, who are committed to partner and work collaboratively with the department and our regulatory agencies to achieve positive outcomes in our complex effort in a resource-constrained environment, can deliver tremendous value and serve a vital role on behalf of the citizens and communities of the region of the Pacific Northwest. I look forward to working with each of you in partnership to make the Hanford site and our community safer as we continue our important cleanup mission for decades to come. And thanks again, as always, for your time and attention. I look forward to your questions later in the session.
I'm going to assume I'm up. All right. Thank you, Susan. You know, I've got my regular presentation and I've got some other notes, and I'm going to ad lib a little today. For those who don't know, this will be my last HAB meeting. I have taken another position within ecology at the Central Region office in Union Gap for both professional and personal reasons. And the good news is Benton County is still in the region for me. So you're going to have the unique opportunity to have a regional director in that role who has some Hanford knowledge. It is the most important cleanup project within my region. It's the most important cleanup project within the state, and I think within the nation. So I'm looking forward to continuing to support the great work that everybody's done here. And having this role the last 3 years has been in that top 3 honors of my career to do. It's a complex project with a lot of passionate people. And it's the relationships with EPA, with Department of Energy and your team, Department of Health, folks on the HAB, and all the folks who rightfully are watching over our shoulders to make sure we're not doing things we shouldn't be doing, or maybe we can do things in a better way. Everybody's feedback's important. So I got lucky. Today's the 30-year HAB celebration. And so we get to have a party at the end of the day. Over the 30 years, the HAB has provided 314 pieces of advice, and there's more on the way. So thank you all for that. Did some quick research, and when I say we did some, Ryan did some for me. The first piece of advice by the HAB was in December 1994, and it was focused on values for cleanup. And our first response back to HAB advice came in January 95, jointly with EPA on advice number 8 involving Hanford funding. Go figure, right? It's continued from day one, 30 years. So if you're curious and have some time, visit hanford.gov and take a look at that advice that's come to us over the last 30 years. You know, in these meetings I've shared before, and I'll share it again, though, the importance of the HAB to ecology and Hanford cleanup. We do rely on your advice and feedback to better understand the public's perspectives and concerns on Hanford issues. Your advice helps inform the decisions we make as a regulator as well. Some really remarkable work achieved over the 30 years in passing the advice, and it requires a large amount of dedication and work to get those done. One of the larger pieces that we found was advice number 262, which was public comment on the Hanford site-wide permit in 2012. And we're working on that permit again now. We remember a lot of workshops and meetings between the staff and board members as that advice was developed. We're taking that advice into consideration today as we prepare the permit for comment again this year. And we'll issue a response to that advice when we get closer to the comment period as well. There's a long story behind why it's taken so long, but I'm not going to go into that. We also recognize what we've gotten out of the board beyond advice. We've listened to your discussions, informal feedback and perspectives during full board meetings and committee meetings as well. And some of that didn't necessarily result in advice, but it was still taken to heart. We get great value out of those conversations, whether it be taking that informal feedback to improve our public involvement or other work, build better relationships between our agency and the community, answering your questions about cleanup and more. As we continue from 30 years, we really look forward to continued engagement with the board, getting your advice, hearing your perspectives, and accomplishing the Hanford cleanup mission. The HAB's input will continue to be a critical component to a better cleanup. We look forward to celebrating 30 years of the HAB with you all more tonight. And I think the thing that stuck with me most out of the last 3 years is the safe, efficient, and effective cleanup of Hanford is at the heart of everything that everybody does around this table and on the site. So thank you all for your dedication to that. And I do want to respect the work my team did. So I'm going to quickly go through the regular slideshow. And I can't see the screen from here, so I don't know if it's up or not, but it should be in your packets if it's not. Okay. And we can go to slide 3 in the interest of time. All right. So we're down to 14 vacancies after a high of 31. We have our HG5 that Deeb Swami was in active recruitment. We're actually scheduling interviews for that right now. And knowledge transfer and mentoring the next generation of our team is critical for our long-term success. And I think I'll add here, go ahead and go to the next slide, but I'll add here that our candidate pools have gotten deeper and deeper over the last year, and we are really hiring some excellent folks with some fantastic background. And I'm just really impressed with the team we've rebuilt, and we have that next generation of people in the building now to continue the work forward. Outreach and education, 33 events reaching over 1,700 people last year. We had 4 Let's Talk About Hanford events. And some of the most recent things we worked on was Let's Talk About Hanford. And we don't just talk about the waste out there. Insects was the topic for this last one. It was a lot of fun. Jefferson Elementary Science Night, Roosevelt High School in Seattle, Nez Perce STEM Fair in Idaho. And in 2024, there's a lot on the horizon. If you're interested in a presentation or having some education brought to some folks you think need it, please contact us at hanford@ecy.wa.gov, and we can talk to your organizations as well. Next slide. Hanford budget, mentioned that in my previous comments. We're got our fingers crossed the 24 fiscal year budget gets passed, and we can move forward as normal. If it doesn't, we'll adapt and pivot, and we'll work with it. Really appreciate the delegation support for Hanford and the buy-in over the last 3 years of folks. There's one thing we can agree on is funding's necessary. It doesn't matter whether you're going to grout waste, you're going to turn it to glass. You need to put in infrastructure, whether it's transportation or buildings, facilities, whatever it might be. So funding's critical, and I'm glad we were able to unite behind a call for adequate funding for Hanford and the complex across the nation, to be honest. This is so important to ecology, we did contract with Van Ness Velden Solutions in DC to help us with our federal advocacy work. They help set up appointments for us and kind of keep their finger on the pulse of what's going on in DC, give us a heads up so we can react in a more responsive and more proactive manner as things come forward. So my personal opinion is the next 3 to 5 years on budget is critical if we're going to get this site cleaned up in this century. And we need to be able to communicate what the site needs and what EM in general needs in order to get cleanup done across the nation. Next slide. I feel like I'm saying this over and over. We're like this close on holistic negotiations. We are going to get it done. A conceptual agreement, I believe, was announced in last May. It's always difficult putting word to paper, and as new eyes come in, there's new discussions and things that happen. So I appreciate everyone's patience, and we will get out, and there will be a robust public comment period associated with that when that finishes. And besides the holistic negotiations, we continue negotiations on many of the milestones, the M15, M16, M85 series specifically in 2024. Compliance activities, you've got the packet. You can check these out. We continue to do our inspections and write our compliance reports and fulfill our obligations to EPA in that respect. Other activities, there's a list of inspections that were conducted, whether it's at tank systems or retention facilities, waste management units, central waste complex, burial grounds. It's fascinating what all the broad scope of work that has to happen out on the site. Their operating permit discharge points. Sometimes we forget we have air quality regulatory requirements of us as well. So we've been out doing inspections at 3 of the specific sites in January. And there will be opportunities for public involvement coming up this year. The Newcon Research Development and Demonstration Permit, spring of 2024. The 2,000 gallon testbed initiative research development and demonstration permit estimated March to April of 2024. And then we have the tri-party agreement public involvement survey for another week, it looks like. So please take a look at that and give us your feedback on how we might improve public involvement. And then the site-wide permit renewal status that I mentioned earlier, we are anticipating a 120-day public comment period in 2024. When we get closer to finalizing all the unit groups, we will provide early notification of the public comment period dates. And when I say unit groups, it's like there's almost chapters in the permit. Each facility has its own section in the permit. It's a overwhelming process to get that done. It's going to be 20,000 pages. But it's such a large site. It is what it is. And I hate using that phrase, but that in this case it is. It'll include 49 unit groups and 2 corrective action unit groups, and ecology, the permittees, the contractors, Department of Energy's team are all working hard and making great progress. We originally looked like we were still like 24 months out. We're getting down to months instead of years. And so I'm looking forward to seeing that come through. And part of that process, of course, will be completing responses to public, tribal, nation, and permittee comments. And then we are acronyms and questions. So I look forward to that when the time comes. Thank you for entertaining my desire to speak a little more today.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you, David. Thank you, folks. And most of all, thank you. I'm one of the few people who've been around the cleanup long enough to remember the board's forming and how much you have done. It's an amazing accomplishment. You've done a lot. I'm going to use the term "we" here because while I haven't always been actively with the board, I've been been part of the cleanup. But this board and the agencies, we've laughed together, we've argued together, we've worked together, we've sometimes cried together. Remembering some of our lost members. But the point is that we've been together, and it's having us here in the room together is makes a real big difference. And I think, if I remember right, the first piece of advice that the EPA responded to was for ERDF. And I think it was like advice number 6 or 8 or something like that. But it's been, you've done amazing things. We've got amazing things yet to go. And I think I want something that David mentioned. I wanted to, again, part of that being together is sometimes hearing the conversation and the things that don't make it into advice are also important. And I think that's I guess kind of my commitment to you is we're going to try and be more present than we have been. And just again, a huge, huge thank you for the time and commitment and the everything that you brought to this board and will continue to bring. Some of the other updates, like David mentioned, we're going to be entering into negotiations on some milestones, not holistic stuff. That's its own lifetime, but the short-term milestones, then the other things that were put on hold a couple years ago. We do have actually a new employee who will be starting in about 3 weeks. So that's some good news for us. She won't physically be here for a while because she currently lives and works in Fairbanks, Alaska. So there has to be some thawing between here and there before she makes it down. But very much looking forward to her joining us. And as Brian and David pointed out, when we get the budget, we may have to pivot, but we'll have those discussions and we'll work together to spend the money wisely. And again, the final update, I think I may have mentioned the last time that one of our longtime folks that used to be that represented EPA to the board, Emmy Liha, I mentioned that she has a new position back in headquarters. She's now the deputy director of the office. But I'm going to go ahead and share some other personal news for her. She's pregnant and will be having a baby in late April. So that's, I guess a third generation of HAB member to come. So again, thank you all. Thank you for being here. And here's to the next 30 years.
Thank you, gentlemen. At this time, we will open it up for board questions or discussions. And please be patient with Judy and I as we try and manage the queue.
I have Chris, Tom, and Pam, and I will look online.
I have a question and then a comment regarding some of what Brian Vance said. Brian, my question is simple. What's the status of Melter 2?
That's one of my favorite questions. We answer that question every day from 2,000 miles away. Then
you have a good answer.
The real path to Melter 2 is through Melter 1. We had to make some modifications to address some in-leakage issues. As we brought the melter up, we were getting a little bit more in-leakage than from a design perspective we expected. The good news is we completed all those modifications. Right now, looks like the testing is continuing today, should complete this week on Melter 1. Looks like the in-leakage has been addressed. We needed to solve that before we got into Melter 2. The tolerances on Melter 2 look a little bit tighter than Melter 1. And so we think there's less of an issue there, but we made all the same modifications to 2 that we've already made with 1, with the exception we have to replace the air lances. I believe we're on track to start Melter 2 heat up this month, and then we'll just continue with the process from there. So Melter 2 is coming together quickly. The startup heaters are installed, the cabling is being connected. The preliminary testing with the power supplies is complete. It's really just a matter of getting through the testing sequence on Melter 1 to verify that when we bring Melter 2 up, we'll be efficient with the process.
Thank you. Now my comment, and this is to the HAB as well. I started my career working for a prime contractor at another DOE site in 1991 at the Fernald site, and I pretty much continued working for prime contractors at DOE sites until I retired a few years ago. One of the things that I've seen over the last 30 years is that in 1991, CERCLA in many regards was still kind of new to DOE sites. There wasn't nearly as much understanding of what to do, how to do things, how to work with regulators as there is today. And so I think in the early 90s, there was a lot of opportunity for policy level advice because of the lack of knowledge of exactly how to implement everything, all the nuances of CERCLA at DOE sites. In the last 30 years, things have matured quite a bit. And I think the opportunity for policy level advice is much tougher now than it was 30 years ago. And I think going forward, when the site gets fully operational with regard to everything that goes on with vitrification, the waste treatment out of the tanks, as gradually contamination in groundwater gets less and less. The site is fundamentally is in operations mode, and it's the same thing day in and day out for 50 years. It's going to be tougher to issue policy level advice because of the fact that the same thing is going to happen over 50 years. And so I think the real challenge that maybe the HAB has and the regulatory agencies going forward with regard to advice is the fact that things have matured quite a bit and things are going to be the same day in and day out for a long time. I think that's the challenge that the HAB is going to have going forward. Leadership in the HAB, all the members of the HAB that we didn't have in 1994 when the HAB was first started, but that is going to be par for the course, say 10 years from now, 20 years from now, 30 years from now. That's just a comment I wanted to make.
Hold on. Mr. Vance, Mr. Enon, and Mr. Bowen, would you like to respond to that?
Or any thoughts?
Any thoughts?
Yeah. Actually, Chris, I agree. I've been pondering that same question about that. That's maybe been may have been a contributing factor to why some of the advice numbers are down. But I do, another very important faction or opportunity for the board or role of the board is communicating things back to your constituencies. So even if sometimes the policy level advice may be less, it doesn't mean the need for the board is reduced.
Thank you all for the remarks and the discussion. I think building on what Chris said, it's sort of a good news, different news story. The good news is a lot of the major decisions at the site have been made, or at least have a path. They didn't when the HAB started. So there was a lot more passion, discussion, and press, and the HAB had a lot more meetings in a lot of more places. So the different news is a lot of those decisions have been made. So we have to figure out what's left to talk about and advise the agencies on. And part of that, as part of Dave Bowen's presentation, the Rev 9 permit mod with 20,000 pages. I think I wasn't around in 2012, but I'm asking for someone who was to give me some context. When that last came around, we had a work group set up that was not an IM team, but it was like a sort of small committee. Is that correct? Anyone who was here? Ryan?
I wasn't here, but I've been doing some research on it. And my understanding was that there were two groups. There was one kind of a work group that was kind of getting some context and meeting before the permit went out for comment. And then another group that kind of started when the permit went out for public comment. And that's the group where they got together and actually developed the advice and stuff. So I think there's the two separate kind of groups that tackled it. But I do know that I've actually talked to Liz a little bit since she was pretty involved in that. She might be a good resource for the board to talk to as well about what you guys did back in 2012.
So since this is sort of a site-wide cross-cutting topic, perhaps we want to take an action to start that preliminary work group to set the groundwork so no one has to read the full 20,000 pages. I don't know if that's something we can do during this meeting, or if there's any interest.
Thank you. I'm feeling a little teary, especially so excited for Emmy. um, eh, David, you have made such an amazing difference. In my previous job before I retired with Hanford Communities, the local ecology office lacked leadership. And, you know, I don't want to talk about what was wrong in the past, but you have provided very much needed leadership within your agency and within the tri-parties. And you've gotten a lot of stuff off the dime. And I'm really sad you're leaving. I'm really sad. So thank you. In the early days of the HAB, no one knew each other. There weren't relationships. And they didn't trust each other. We spent hours on meeting minutes. It was such a waste of time. It was unbelievable. And through the interaction over the years, people who disagreed with each other fundamentally came to have an ability to work together and party together. And I kind of miss that. People would go to the bar and have a beer after the meeting and joke and talk about families and their life beyond Hanford. And I don't feel like we have that opportunity as much anymore. And so much of cleanup has been accomplished. In the early days, it was hard to focus on what issues to deal with, how to get our arms around it. And Dave, I'm glad you mentioned ERDF. ERDF was a bit threatening to understand how it was going to work. Is it going to be okay to put all that waste in our backyard and leave it there forever? And Hanford cleanup has progressed because ERDF does work. And in my interactions nationally, the Oak Ridge region was so opposed to a landfill on their site, they slowed cleanup. And they didn't want it. And DOE headquarters says, you're gonna get it and figure it out. And now they're excited about their landfill and they've lost so many years. And so I really think the leadership from EPA on ERDA for all these years has been really tremendous. Anyway, I was thinking about HAB members who've passed and those who aren't active anymore and trying to reach out and invite them to come to our party tonight. People invested so much of themselves over the years. And to come tonight. Not sure what else to say, but I think we need to build teamwork amongst our new members and figure out how to do that so that we can work collectively into the future. And Brian, your leadership also has just been so important to us, and your willingness to work with the HAB. I appreciated you staying in touch with me through the dark, lonely days of COVID. And to have that opportunity to share some thoughts and to keep thinking about how the HAB could move forward and be constructive. Your commitment has really been appreciated, and thank you very much. And Ryan, thank you for the role that you're playing. We had a gap in ecology for a while, and your enthusiasm and willingness to work with the HAB and your leadership have made a really big difference. So thanks to all of you, and Dave, we're gonna miss you. Good luck in your new job. Thank you.
Thanks, Pam. For the queue, we have Susan, Mia, Amber, and Rob. Anyone online, please raise your hand or access the chat.
Okay, I'm going to put the three of you on the spot. What upcoming decisions in the 2024 calendar year do you have coming up that the board can look into and provide policy level advice on.
Is everybody waiting for me to go?
You can go first.
Well, 2024 is probably already in the can. What we need to have to think about is the future, 26, 27, 28 and out, and the things that we'll face in the future. The course we're on now is really pretty well defined, and we have to go execute. We are in a period where there's tremendous budget uncertainty for 25, likely for, or 24, certainly for 25 as well. In an election year, there's a lot of factors that make near-term advice not very practical. I would just continue to urge the HAB to continue to look out in the future more. You will, at a point, as David mentioned, we hope to be able to get the holistic agreement settlement out in place and have feedback on that. David will be interested in RICA Rev 9 feedback in 2024. So there's things that are coming that are a little bit closer and tactical, but frankly, those seeds have been sown years ago as well. So I would just encourage the board to continue to look farther into the future for those things that give us the time to react in a cycle that we operate in, which is at least 2 years for any major changes. And generally it's 3 to 5.
Yeah, I can echo Brian's comments there. The one thing that I see on the horizon is the design of high-level waste facility is starting to kick back in. So there may be opportunity there as that proceeds. Near term, the Rev 9 site-wide permit, hosting negotiations and getting comment to us on those items is critical for us in 2024. I'm not sure that's really advice necessarily, but comments tend to have advice mixed in them. So it doesn't necessarily have to come directly from the HAB as a group, but individuals as well would be greatly appreciated.
And again, I'll sort of a broken record sort of thing. We've got circular decisions for 100N, 100K coming up. I mean, again, those have been to committees in the past. So a lot of that discussion's been out there, but we'll have public comment on the proposed plans in about a year-ish. So that'll be an opportunity again, whether it's advice or just comments. We're going to be talking about 320, the soils under 324 building. Hopefully a little sooner than that. Obviously you get some updates before that, but again, that's going to be represent a focused feasibility study and a proposed plan leading to a ROD amendment potentially. So no, not potentially, it will. I mean, but so that's coming up. Obviously the continuing with the cleanup priorities advice, that's always important. And I guess the one sort of thing that I always ask for is any suggestions on how we can better get our messages out is important, and celebrate the successes. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Mia and then Amber.
Hi, yeah. I'm wondering when you're planning on providing updates on the 324 building cleanup to the public, and also do you have a sense of timing for when the public will be able to comment on the cleanup options being discussed for 324 building specifically?
Well, the public comment period will be on the proposed plan. We will probably bring some things, some updates to the CARM committee and so forth before that, and engage with you know, do all the things that we would normally engage on along the way. But the intent is to provide some updates, like I said, at least to the CARM committee if nowhere else, along as we go along. I'm not sure. I think we will probably give a brief status update in March at the March committee meeting, but it won't have a lot in there yet because still working the schedules and some of the, obviously the technical details too. So
Do you have any sense of timing for the proposed plan?
my goal, my ideal, and I don't know if it can happen, but would be actually this fall.
Mia, does that cover your questions? All right. So to Amber and then Rob.
Thank you. Look forward to celebrating with everybody tonight for 30 years. I just want to thank you for the updates. And Tom, I like your idea there. We need to figure out how we can efficiently give feedback on the permit updates. So looking for ways that we can do that in bite-sized chunks. That sounds good. I think that's, Tom, you made some good points about just how advice has maybe changed over the years. And now that there's more things going on at the site that we were just visioning like 20 years ago, it's a different approach. So we still need to kind of figure that out as the HAB. How do we give feedback on ongoing projects? David, just thank you for your service here at the Tri-Cities office, and wondering what is your time frame for transitioning, and who would be the best point of contact in the next couple months? But thank you very much.
Oh, thank you for that. Yeah, I did leave that out. My official last day is February 15th. Stephanie Schleif, the deputy program manager, is going to be the point of contact at least through May. My email's blowing up as I'm sitting here, and looks like we're getting ready to try and identify an interview panel. So I'm expecting that recruitment to go out very quickly. I've been given express permission to continue to assist at least until a new program manager is in place. And then, as I mentioned earlier, the regional director includes Benton County along with 6 other central Washington counties. And if my expertise and my experience from these 3 years is useful, I've made it very clear the door is open to reach out, and I'll assist however I can. So and then holistic negotiations rollout, I will be engaging in the public meetings that will be associated with that, and help walk that through. It's not really fair to throw somebody in front of that bus. So I'm going to make sure that I'm around to assist with that. And then if you can't get a hold of Stephanie, then Lois Dahman, the executive assistant, can hook you up with whoever you might need, depending on whatever the topic is. And one thing I thought of, Tom, as we were discussing everything, is theoretically the fact sheet will summarize and highlight the changes in the permit. So that might be a place to start.
Okay, great. We have Rob Davis and then Rob Parmalee.
Good morning. So I've been a part of this board for, 20 years now, and we have made a lot of progress, changes. One of the difficulties, first of all, I think our most significant efforts have been to impart our values to the contractors and DOE and ecology, what the values are for this group, and remove, treat, and dispose, our DD, is the primary value that we do have. And how we apply those values to these technical problems is a very difficult challenge for us. Because again, we're not here to tell you how to do things and what to do and, do the technical work. We're here to support you and to make sure that our values come through. And I think that we are really trying to do a very good job. However, there are certain areas that are easy, low-hanging fruits that we can apply our values to. For example, the FFRDC reports asked for public comment. They asked for regulatory comment on the proposals that they put forth. We should be advising DOE on what we feel that public support should be. And again, okay, so that's kind of the big picture that I see. I really appreciate seeing all the progress that's being done on the site over the years. I realize it's a huge problem. Just taking a look at our priorities for the 26 timeframe up here. I think we recognize you couldn't possibly accomplish every one of them, but our ideals and our values are put into those, and serious consideration should be given. The other, I could go on for a long time. I'm very proud of this board. I'm very proud of all the DOE managers and the acquaintances that I've had. And Dave, kudos, you've done a lot of good stuff for us. Thank you. And like I said, Brian, you're about the most dynamic manager we've had for a long, long time. And I appreciate that. You're very forthcoming in what the problems are, and you explain it in a relatively easy way that we can understand. And so going into the next 30 years, I'm sure I'm not going to make it much more past this term or next term, whatever. But the thing is progress is being done, and other areas that I'd like to explore and that we have paid little attention to is the general site quality assurance programs. Now that we have these great ideas, how are we making sure of these great ideas and we're moving forward in a cost-effective and efficient way? I guess it's probably about I really do appreciate the effort and the ability for the board to give advice. There's a very tricky line between what's technical advice and what's value advice. But again, we do no harm. We try not to do any harm. And so with that, on to the next 30 years. And if we can accomplish as much in the last 10 years as we've done in the next 10, I'll be very, very happy. Thank you.
Rob?
Can you hear me okay there? Brought up some good questions about the 324 area. And I guess I'm not real clear. What organization is the final decision maker on what we do with 324 area?
The Department of Energy is the responsible, they're responsible for it, right? For the 324 building itself, it's pretty much the department's sole decision. For the soils underneath, it's a joint decision between DOE and EPA, and that's the part that we're working on right now is evaluating the change conditions and figuring out what's the right way to go forward.
And do we expect some decisions to be made, say, by the end of this year?
I think we're going to have a pretty good idea of what the best path forward is by the end of this year. Whether it'll be finally immortalized in a decision or not, that ROD amendment I mentioned, I'm not sure, but I think we'll know, and we'll have been talking to folks about what that looks like. Brian, do you know anything different or?
No, that's, I mean, we have, I think technically we have a pretty clear path and what we think is the best path to take. We'll work the regulatory path with David and their team. There's a focused feasibility study that'll be a part of that process. But at the end of the day, I think the steps that we highlighted or talked our way through last year are the sequence that we'll execute to really becomes a question of the regulatory elements of it, making sure they're aligned with the EPA. And as you recognize, and everyone should recognize, the budget plays a big part in our way ahead relative to the broader site perspective. We're in the path, as you recognize, to combine the two offices by the end of the fiscal year. So there won't be an ORP and RL anymore. It won't be either one of those names anymore. It'll be something different. We're working that now. But we also have to transcend the way we all think about the site into a single risk management portfolio and use the tools that we have to prioritize effectively and execute the mission within the funding that's available. Once we make the agreement relative to holistic negotiations, they're not truly holistic. They're really the tank waste mission way ahead. The rest of the site has to also be factored in and within available funds. So there's discussions that will be coming in the future about, you know, what the agreement means relative to the tank waste commitments that we're making. Each of the agents is committed to, and then we have to rationalize the rest of the site portfolio picture. So I think those are discussions that will be part of maybe some of the future HAB meetings in a way that we can talk about some of those things, make sure that from a priority perspective, we're getting inputs from each of you, the constituencies you support and represent, because those are difficult decisions or can be difficult decisions over time. And that's really the next frontier for our site, is that transition we'll make and then really continuing to do the very best we can to optimize risk reduction per dollar, because that ultimately that makes our workforce the safest, our site the safest, and protects the community the most.
Okay, thank you. Michelle?
As I listen to the comments today, the one thing that occurs to me, I've been on the HAB board for just a little over a year. And when I think about that community engagement and community outreach piece specifically, and I think about Hanford, there are a lot of areas where there is impact to the community that don't really have anything to do with the cleanup and technical aspects of what's happening on the facility. But when we think about things like impact to the economy of the region, the levels of employment that are there, are we going to be seeing changes up or down based on the work that's being done? Transportation's a topic that gets a lot of discussion, both from a public safety standpoint and just the movement of people around the region. And I would say that as a board member, and we think about the lessening opportunities for advice at that policy level, there are opportunities for us to be more educated and continue to kind of share the message of the contractors and the agencies back to our own communities so that we understand and can help be prepared for changes that will happen. As cleanup happens, the levels of employment, the investments in the economy, all of that's going to shift. And the community has to be ready for that too. And I think that the Hanford Advisory Board is kind of the first line for that. You know, it can't just be TRIDEC and Hanford communities. It has to be the local governments, and all the other agencies need to be aware. So the one request I would have as a board member and as a representative to one of those agencies is that, you know, please be specific and direct when you can. If there's information you want us to be carrying back to our constituencies, or if there's something that we can proactively do to be helpful. For example, in the community outreach subcommittee, Ryan came back to our committee a couple of months ago and said, hey, you know, we've got some new state requirements under the Washington HEAL Act, and we've got to look into that a little bit and find out how do we respond as an agency, and how does that change what we need to
do from community engagement. Let's talk about it. So again, if there are opportunities where we can be a helpful partner beyond just that advice on a policy level, you know, use us for that and let us know how we can be that for you.
Thank you, Michelle. Any other questions? Oh, Jeff, sorry. And then Tom, you've got another one? Okay.
Thank you. Just wanted to comment about the tension between the need for additional funding for the site and the impression that the TPA agencies give the public that everything's under control, there's no problems at Hanford, and for the most part, that's true. I think it would be helpful, though, in terms of risk reduction, if the public knew more, our legislators knew more about what the risks were. You know, 324 building is on the front page now, but there's other risks at Hanford. What if there's an earthquake in the basin with the cesium capsules drains of water? You know, there's a whole host of things. The high level waste treatment. I think more transparency about why the site needs, you know, more than $3 billion a year. You know, so going back to Oregon, what's the story? Because on the surface, Hanford is in great shape, you know, so why do we need to spend more money at Hanford? I think there's some very, very valid reasons why we need to spend more money at Hanford. I think we need a better story about risk management and why additional funding is needed to manage those risks. Thanks.
And Jeff, thanks for those comments. It's interesting because that's the messaging we do take to the delegation, but we're not so good at doing that here in the community. So take that to heart and think about that. We have a lot of one-pagers that describe the importance and all the great work that's been done, but what's still left to do. And then we roll into typically the faster you get it done, the less expensive it's going to be. And so that's kind of the message we carry, but we obviously haven't done that very well in the community based on what you just said.
We have Tom, Mia, and Chris.
Actually, it was Mia.
Oh,
No, yes.
Yes, Tom, Mia, and Chris. And then Susan has a little announcement, and we're going to revisit the agenda, the timing on the agenda. So, Tom.
Yeah, something Michelle brought up that sort of prompted a thought. A lot of what we're talking about is sort of the volume of advice and how things have shifted. But the conversations are still important. And we heard from the regulators that, you know, they're in the room, they hear what we're talking about, what's important to our interests and the people we represent. And if we have the space to have those conversations, we can find where there might be high level advice that comes out of a technical discussion that isn't related to the technical discussion at all. But just having the space to have the conversation is valuable. And the interest, the point of view of everyone at the table is valid. So for those of you who haven't been on the board for a long time, just know that your point of view is valid even if you don't feel like you know what you're talking about, because there's always something worth saying.
Over to Mia.
I just have a question about TISCR. In the recent DNFSB reports, it's came out that there are different issues occurring with TISCR, a pressure control valve not operating as designed, additional leaks. And it seems like when you look back, there's like this constant kind of leaks coming out of TISCR. I'm just wondering how that's being addressed.
Very well. TISCA was a developmental project, and so there have been, I will say, relatively minor issues associated with its operation. When the leaks were discussed, what we really identified was some dried residue around a couple of fittings. That was characterized as a leak to be conservative. We took conservative actions based on that. But there was never a situation when it was more than that. And we've had relatively routine material issues with the project that have continued to get resolved relatively effectively. We're continuing to challenge the contractor to be more efficient in the outage periods that we're executing now, because over time, feeding the melter continuously is going to be our priority. And so we need to make sure that we learn the lessons from Tisker, apply those lessons to what will follow Tisker, to continue to provide that capability beyond the developmental effort that we had planned for Tisker, which was 5 years, but certainly we could extend that as we needed to from an engineering perspective. All those lessons are being applied to the next feed system that we're developing now, called the Advanced Modular Pretreatment System. But overall, this outage that we're in now is going well. We expect that outage to be completed in the first half of March. This week, they'll be swapping out or taking out the ion exchange columns to be installed next week. And so from a broader perspective, as a demonstration project, Tisker has been wildly successful, and it's been really helpful for us as we look to what the future might hold for something a little bit better based on the lessons we learned with that unit. So I think we're in a great position. I think Tisker has operated very well, and we see nothing but good things coming from it.
Just as a follow-up question, for sending the waste from AP 106 back through Tisker, when is that expected to begin? Is that the plan still?
The current plan will be to move the waste from AP 106 back to AP 107, retreat starting in the March-April timeframe. That first batch will be compliant with respect to the waste acceptance criteria based on our analysis now. Every gallon we produce from that point will be compliant. And by the end of the year, we'll be in a position that we intended to be for the feedstock for the waste treatment plant, and we'll have more operational experience with Tisker that will enhance our ability to execute outages faster. So, a little bit of a issue with the waste acceptance criteria. The benefits from that will be really positive for our team in the site as we really gear up for what we're going to be facing next year with the start of waste treatment plant operations in 2025.
And Chris?
One other thing that's really different between the early 90s and now is the rise of social media. And I've read a number of reports recently from various magazines that increasingly, especially the younger generations, but all across America, people are tending to get their news more from social media than from print media, from newsletters, from news magazines, from newspapers, from reporters on television. And I think one of the big issues in terms of communicating what's happening at Hanford has to deal with social media in some way, shape, or form. For example, when Annette Carey published her in the Tri-City Herald, her articles on the 324 building and the increased amount of contamination that had been discovered beneath it, those stories were printed verbatim in Yahoo. And when you read Yahoo, you tend to get hundreds and hundreds of comments. Some of those comments went to the fact that, and I don't know whether they were malicious, out of ignorance, or whatever, but a couple comments dealt with the fact that all aquatic life along the Columbia River, from the Tri-Cities down to Astoria, was going to be dead in the next 10 years if this doesn't happen. Another comment dealt with this contamination going down the coast of Oregon to California and extinguishing all life in the ocean down to Northern California. There was another comment that dealt with people living within 5 miles of Columbia River were going to get cancer because of the increased radiation in the Columbia River. These kind of things people read, and some people are going to believe them. And I think one of the big issues we have, maybe as in the HAB and DOE going forward, is how do we deal with comments in the social media and things that appear in the social media? Because I don't think the regulatory agencies or DOE is doing a good job of that now. I don't think we as HAB are doing a good job of that now. But I think that's something that can be addressed and should be addressed going forward. The social media is going to become increasingly important in how people communicate and how they get their news.
Yeah, Chris, we agree. And Carrie and our team, working with the Department of Energy communications team, frequently think about those types of issues. Our goal in every one of those situations is get the facts and data and get them out as efficiently as we can to make sure that the real information is available for those that are going to spend the time to look. Frequently, the people that believe those first reports, we can't predict who's going to believe what. We hope that they'll work their way back to the sources of information that are facts-based and not emotions-based over time. And we do our very best to make sure that we're as timely as we can be to get the facts out. Part of the discussion previously about, building credibility and trust in the community is a big focus of ours, has been for the last several years, to make sure that when people read those types of stories, they, in our community and in the region, they knew who to ask to get the information that's factually accurate and correct and helpful. We always strive to be quick, but we'll never be quicker than someone that writes their perspective or perception and blasts it out into the world, because we do have a responsibility to ensure the right information is put out there. So Carrie will continue to work with the department, work with certainly Ryan and EPA to make sure that when those types of things do happen, we focus on the facts, get the facts out. And I think it's everyone's obligation to steer people back to the actual facts-based information to make those judgments, and recognize that, we do have an obligation. I take that obligation seriously, that we're going to get the facts and data out as soon as we can to help people see through the emotion and the misinformation.
All right, thank you. Susan, I think that you have a little statement.
I have a little something for David Bowen. Thank you, from the board.
I think we should talk about David as the quitter from now on, just to be clear.
Okay, so we're a bit ahead of schedule, although I think everybody had time to get all their questions. And I really appreciate you gentlemen taking the time to talk to us. So we're going to go ahead and take our break now. And then we will reconvene at 10:45.
For public comment. So we'll have a little mingle time, and hope that you'll join us in a little coffee break here. And in the words of Marie Antoinette, let them eat cake.
Okay, everyone, can I have everyone's attention, please? It is 10:45. And do we have anyone that wants to make public comment? Judy, I don't believe we have anybody.
Online, I'm checking.
Okay.
No.
Anyone in the room wants to make public comment?
Check. Last time. Josh, you don't see any chat for public comment? Can you check? You're not on? Okay. Then I think will we move to the next agenda item?
I think that's normally the practice, is to move to.
Checking. Okay, going once, going twice.
Yep. So the next agenda item is the round robin perspectives from HAB members on what was an experience or insight that shapes your values and how you lead. And part of this is it came out of the conversation with Brian Moreno at the December meeting. to try and help us get to know each other better as part of that team building and trying to build a more cohesive board. So I'm going to start.
Yeah, so just in taking this, if you want to add in when you're ready, flip your tent up. And if you want to pass, you can, but this is an opportunity to share a little bit about your motivation for being on the HAB and how you view leadership.
No, I'm not going to start.
You're not going to start. So Rebecca.
No, Rob.
Rob?
Let's start at the corner.
Okay.
And then
Okay,
I
we're
just
getting a
wanted
cue.
you-
This is good.
Becky, go ahead.
Can you just repeat the question? I did
Okay.
not understand what the question was.
What was an experience or insight that shapes your values and how you lead?
And we've got Rob, Tom, and Chris so far.
So I can start? Okay. I guess I have a couple of perspectives. One more personal base and one as part of the HAB organization. This is going on my second year, I guess, as a HAB member. And when I was first asked to join, I really had no clue what the purpose of the HAB was. Oh, sorry.
There we go. That's good.
Yeah, I really had no clue of what the HAB did, what being a board member really meant. And it was quite a learning experience for me to just kind of get thrown in here and listen to all of the conversations that occurred, the differences in opinion, whether they be technical, based strictly on your constituencies or just different opinions, and how we kind of came together to hopefully come up with some kind of a consensus to actually make some policy suggestions. And how, as a non-union, non-management employee representative, what did that really mean? And I guess I kind of looked at it in two ways. One, being employed by a contractor out in the Hanford area. Well, I guess personally, looking at how am I going to remain employed as we go through all of the things that have to go on out of the Hanford area. That's one thing I wanted to look at. The other thing is working in a safe environment, not only from a worker safety and health perspective, but also from a perspective from the general public health and safety. That being a representative of a citizen of the Tri-Cities area. So those are a couple of things I kind of looked at. I also determined during this time that being a member of the HAB is not necessarily an easy thing to do. To participate in a committee, to participate during the discussions as we talk about different policies that we want to bring forward. It's a lot goes into developing that mentality to be able to do that. I look at my email inbox, and I still have 57 this morning that I hadn't answered yet or hadn't looked at yet because there's just so much traffic there. And it does take some time to balance work priorities, home priorities and priorities that I think I should have as a HAB member. And it's not always easy. And the impression that I get or that I have is to what our role is, and again, this again from my perspective is providing some useful high-level advice to DOE and the other tri-party participants, and then really depend on their perspectives on what the different risks are to make those kind of decisions, possibly based on advice that we provide, understanding that there are a lot of risks to consider, financial risk, operational risk, health and safety risk, all of these things that need to go into actually making decisions, and hopefully the policy that we provide goes into those decisions. Again, understanding and relying on their decision-making capabilities based on total risk out there that they have to get through. And I guess that's really all I had to say.
And then Chris and Tom, who actually, I didn't catch who was first. Any? Okay, Chris, go ahead. We'll go to Tom, and then we have Richard Bloom online. So Chris.
This is comment, thoughts, kind of deals with people. When I got out of graduate school, I'd spent a long time in undergraduate and graduate school. And actually, my first job was not in the environmental industry, it was in the oil industry. And I got a job as a research geochemist at City Service, Citgo. At that time, Citgo was a Fortune 50 company. It was in the top of the 50 largest companies in the United States. But they were just starting to rebuild the research lab, rebuild it from scratch. And so there are a lot of people like me who are new coming into a very large company that knew nothing about how large companies operated. And one of the people that came in and management was really excited about is they hired a star researcher from Exxon. Exxon at that time, and still has a reputation as probably a world-class research lab and certainly the best in the oil industry. And we were able to hire one of their top scientists. But this top scientist had severe allergy problems, really bad allergy problems. But it turned out after a while that the problems were an allergy. He had a very bad alcohol problem. Really bad alcohol problem. And my manager, the manager of geological research, took a lot of time and effort. They sent him to different institutes to help him with the problem. And this persisted over a year or so. And eventually it didn't help. And he died in an alleyway somewhere in Tulsa, Oklahoma. But I was absolutely amazed coming as a brand new out of graduate school to one of the largest companies in the United States, that a company cared that much about its personnel to help them time and time again to try and overcome this alcohol problem. And that's left an impression with me in my whole career, in that it's all about people. When you manage, it's not the technical decisions that you make, it's the people decisions that you make. And you find as a manager that your biggest problems generally are not necessarily financial problems or technical problems, they're people problems. All your employees' problems become your problems, but often you can't do anything about them. But they're still your problems because they affect performance of the employee at work. People bring their problems to work. They don't leave them at home. We like to think that, but they don't. And so here at the HAB, you know, one of the things that if we're a team lead or an IM lead or a committee lead or something, it's really the people that we have to work with and recognizing that everybody in that committee, everybody in that IM team is going to bring a different perspective, have different problems, and we have to work with them in some way, shape, or form. And I think Michelle talked about this a little earlier. We're a team. We have to work like a team, be a team. But again, it's how we all interact with people. And this, as I said, was really brought home to me by a person who had severe alcohol problems. And I watched the manager go what I would have considered at that time way above and beyond the call of duty to try and help an employee. But we have to help each other and recognize that we all have problems and take that into account as we interact with one another.
So I'm looking at the question, and I don't necessarily consider myself a leader, but I'm going to talk about something that influences the way I listen. So back before we had Microsoft Word and redlining and editing like that, you know, I was in middle school. I turned in a paper and I got back a draft, and it was just covered in red ink, and I was distraught because I don't like being corrected. I'm, you know, a Leo. My dad looked at me and said, you know, that just means that that person cared enough to take the time to suggest ways that it could be better. And, you know, you should be grateful. You say thank you anytime someone edits the heck out of your work, because that just means that person cares enough to take the time. And I look around the room and online and just the history of the board. Everyone here is here because we care enough to be part of the discussion and to make the site better and cleaner and improve the cleanup and make it safe. So anytime you have a disagreement with someone, even if you're passionate, it's a thank you moment. You know, I thank you for caring enough to voice your opinion, even if it contradicts my own. We're here for the same reason, and that's to get the site cleaned up.
Richard?
Oh, I guess I'm sorry I can't be there, but feeling a little under the weather and didn't want to spread it around. Yeah, I've worked out on the Hanford site for 30 plus years. I've worked DOE sites 6 years. I've worked contractors. When you're in an organization as big as Hanford is, I started with Little Westinghouse, which was 3,200 employees. And over the 6 years of employment, we shrunk to 1,600 employees. And you learn, gee, when you have that many layoffs, management has a important role, you know, picking and choosing. And they do ruin people's lives. Actually, as we shrunk in size, we actually got better. And eventually Westinghouse took over the entire site. And in fact, Rockwell won, outnumbered everybody. And their management came in and was telling us how to run it. And so in working out there, I know how big of a struggle it is to get anything done. I've studied time usage. When a craft goes out to do work, he does really well if he puts in 2 hours a day. There is something called work control out there, and it's not to get work done, it's to control the work. And people get used to not doing any work, and they're very frustrated. And frustration, Hanford is a very tough place to work, and that's my perspective. And my goal in my service on the HAB has been to not make, just as what was mentioned before, do no harm, have HAB not do harm to make it even harder for the job to get done out there. People are motivated to get the job done. And making it harder is only adding to the frustration. The important part. I think in some of the, personally over the years, some HAB advice has come back, and I looked at that HAB advice affecting a document I was doing, and I said, it's stupid. It becomes one size fits all. And so over the years, I've tried to the number of things put in advice to make it clear, more concise, and aim it at what we're trying to accomplish, not put it as kitchen sink. So those are the things that motivate me. Representing West Richland, which has grown from 5,000 people to 17,000 right now. My house, I go out, I overlook the Hanford site. And important in representing is making our community feel safe, understanding the risks. And just like was said, comments like, well, we're going to pollute the entire river all the way down to Portland. Those things we have to address. The mother calling a friend saying, is it safe to come over here to play soccer? Should play over here? Type of thing. So that's what motivates me, and that people understand the actual risk and also understand the actual consequence of what we do. So that's all.
Thank you, Richard. Jeff?
Thank you. Slightly off topic, but I'm still digesting Brian Vance's comments this morning, which I thought in the main were very, very good and well thought out. However, I'm a little bit puzzled by what the HAB's mission is based on his comments. So he ticked through a number of things that he said that the HAB shouldn't be doing, or maybe DOE doesn't need the HAB's help on. And a few of the things he listed was regulatory, technical, science, operations, budgets, and contracts. So maybe that's why we got rid of the Budgets and Contracts Committee last year. But so that was fairly clear, but what was unclear to me was the other side is exactly what the HAB is supposed to be doing in what areas. So I'm just a little confused after his talk about what our mission is, because most of the time spent in the committees is reviewing things like the technical details of tank integrity, for example. But so that's my comment. I'm confused about what our mission is.
Thank you, Jeff. Steve, and then Amber.
Well, I suppose I could go actually just trying to address Jeff's comment, because I think I've held that same question. But what comes back to me is the fact that we are a communication piece for the public and a liaison to DOE, to trying to make sure that the word gets out as to what the intended distribution of funding is going to be and how it's going to mitigate risk. I hear the frustration of the technical details that the HAB sometimes can get wound around, but I also feel that it's extremely important to improve just the public educational elements around the fact that this is a fairly complex cleanup responsibility that we all have to ourselves. DOE just being the ones that are being tasked to take care of it. I do think that we just need to continue the dialogue amongst ourselves and with our different entities that we represent. And I was actually excited by the fact that we added more people, because as much as it seems like it liquidated our own presence and participation on the HAB board, I think the more people that are aware of what DOE is trying to do here, ecology, EPA, everybody, is benefited by more people understanding and having a vehicle in which to kind of share information. To Chris's point on the social media, that information really should be something that we all stress and combat and point to legitimate sources for where we get that information. And that's just going to be increasingly difficult going forward, period. But I think it's something you can't give up on. I think we need to keep doing what we're doing and just trying to be, trying to make it all feel relevant, because as soon as we stop seeing that possibility, then it's kind of game over. Thanks.
Amber?
Thank you. I was thinking about like one experience that has shaped how I lead or participate with others in group settings. And so for those of you that don't know my background, in the early 2000s is when I got involved with the HAB as a young organizer with Heart of America Northwest. And I think over the last many, many years of my life, and later I was elected to Spokane City Council and I served for 8 years. And then now I'm a Spokane County Commissioner. And the best piece of advice I ever received about leadership was from the city council president back in like 2010, 2012. When I served with him, he said, and I hadn't heard this phrase, although I know it's well used, perfection is the enemy of the good. But I hadn't really heard that phrase. And I grew up in a household with a mom who was always pushing me to be, you know, perfection in your writing and details and every sentence and every word. And so something I was going to bring up to this group is I think that one of the values and things that we keep working on, and it evolves as there's different people around the table, is this idea of we can get our message across. It's not always perfect. And there's always things that could be added. And I'm pointing at myself here too, but trying to get to that consensus means sometimes you're not going to get it perfect in your mind, but we can all work together to develop values-based, priorities-based advice, and don't get caught up sometimes in a couple words, although sometimes, you know, those words are meaningful and to each of us. So it's an interesting dance of how we can create advice that is reflective of everyone in the room, but it may not be perfect in your mind. So I've kind of kept that with me in my own personal life as well as my professional life. Like perfection is the enemy of the good, because you can move forward, or you can get caught up and not move forward. And so I'm proud of how the HAB has worked through that, even though sometimes we've had challenges because a certain word is very meaningful to one person, but maybe not to others. So that's just a insight that has shaped my my life and my work. I have a new county commissioner I work with now who's kind of a perfectionist. And so I've been trying to teach him, you know what? We're not going to get everything in this particular policy, but we can move forward. We can make change incrementally, and that's valuable. So those are just some thoughts.
Are there others who would, and thanks for that wording, share insights about what makes for good leadership or insights about working with others? So Rob Davis and then Michelle.
I can really relate to what Steve had said as well as Amber. At some point you have to say it's good enough and move on and make progress. And sometimes we do try to be perfect. But as far as my personal experiences, so I've kind of been a nuclear junkie for all of my career, with the exception of my grad school work. I worked commercial nuclear reactors. I did an internship at UANC at the N reactor for 6 weeks in my senior year at college. Worked with Westinghouse for a number of years at Hanford site, then worked at INEL for Exxon Nuclear, and then was a project manager at the Nevada test site for a program on spent fuel storage, and then I decided to quit and go back to grad school, and there I met a real interesting fellow named Doug Riggs, who had been a legislative director for Doc Hastings, and he kind of got me a little interested in the politics of it, and we decided to form a new group, and the group was called the Hanford Information Network. And it was one where Doug and I got a small grant from the state of Washington, and we went around to public schools. And over the years of I think 98 and 99, we probably visited over 5,000 students in high schools and their science projects. Very, very successful. Pam was also involved in a number of those activities with the Hanford communities. And there it was a wide, eye-opening experience, talking to young students that never really heard of Hanford. I think that was real important. And so that really formed a lot of my wanting to contribute to be part of the action, so to speak, of the Hanford Advisory Board. And so after we sold our startup company in 2004, I moved on to become a member of the board and teach at CBC a little bit. And then I worked for Bechtel in completing the parts of the WTP. So I'd always wanted to contribute to the problems created by nuclear waste. And I think that it's manageable. I think that, from one committee I was on at one point, we were looking at 9 different options, including the one of shooting waste to space, and all these were considered. And Rockwell was a team leader on that job, but there were a number of options, but the caution was always that do no harm and make sure that you can recover from any mistakes. And so the Yucca Mountain was basically designed with the idea of a 50-year storage period where we could retrieve all the waste out of the mountain if something went haywire. And so a number of those activities were very thoughtful and very progressing. And so I just hope, with regards to experiences, to help me shape my values. My values is really maybe way back in Boy Scouts, where you went on patrols and you cleaned up other people's garbage. Do good, and try to contribute, and don't just be the bump on the log. Contribute to the betterment of everybody. So that's my driving force here, and I hope. And the thing about what Rob had led us off with is that, and I say this to Lindsay several times. I said, it's hard to deal in just, it's hard not to get into technical questions or technical advice because many of the questions are technical. Many of the questions that our members bring up and ask are technical questions. And so, and maybe there's a better way for us to understand this. And I mentioned in my last short note to you that I think QA, which should be a good thing. I think that we need to all appreciate the fact that there are codes and standards. When we talk about transportation of nuclear waste across the country, DOE is not doing it on their own. Okay, they're going to follow the laws, and the laws by the NRC and the laws by the various states that it's going to go through. And so in order to make that happen, it's already there. Or for example, the codes and standards used to build the pipeline from the east to the west, or the west to the east. You know, those got to be done to codes and standards that are existing today. And those are technical issues. And so anyway, I do have that difficulty, Lindsay. And I know you're really, I've stressed your patience several times, but, and I thank you, you know, it's good conversations, but I do think we need to be careful with the technical because we can't really tell them what to do, but we can certainly bring up, I think, technical concerns and have those concerns addressed. Thank you.
Michelle.
I had to really think about this. I mean, the why to be engaged with the HAB was the easy one. You know, my hometown is Arco, Idaho, first city in the world to be lit by atomic power. You know, I've seen the versions of the INEL, INEEL, INL, all the merging and splitting of multiple contractors. But, you know, my hometown is 1,000 people in a county that's home to 75% of a nuclear reservation. I grew up seeing firsthand what the economic and employment and policy impacts are for those communities. So in coming to Tri-Cities and having the organization that I lead have a seat on the HAB, it was not a question for me as to whether I was going to have that seat or farm it out to somebody else, because I care about how nuclear facilities impact their communities, you know, and I've been a proponent and a supporter for a long time because of that. I'm a third generation nuclear employment family. So that's my why. But when I think about what experience or insight has shaped my values and how I lead, I've had the unique opportunity over 25 years to serve as an executive director for multiple kinds of organizations, working with economic development, community development, workforce development, small business, aviation, nuclear, water, wastewater, education, nonprofits, healthcare, local governments. The only thing that was consistent was being the executive director of an entity that worked in that field. And in all of those, the value and the insight that is most important to me, and I try to bring to everything, is the idea of having that curiosity and desire to learn as a novice. I never try to come to the table as the subject matter expert. Instead, always trying to come to the table and understand the why and the foundation of that entity. And anytime there's something that looks like this is the way we've always done it, my first instinct is always to understand why. Why do you do it that way? Why? And just continue to question that. And then really believing with my whole heart that if I listen to understand from other people, I will learn something. And for me, I think that's one of the most valuable things we can do as members of the HAB is to listen to each other, listen to our presentations from that standpoint of, I am not the subject matter expert. I want to understand what you're bringing to the table, and then ask the questions that naturally come because of that. The other value for me is just a profound belief that personal connection drives opportunity. And so the more we have opportunities to get to know each other, spend time together as people, that helps us understand that special perspective that shapes why people believe what they believe, or how they approach a particular issue or topic. And when you understand that, it makes it that much easier for us to communicate and understand and learn from each other. So for me, those are my big ones.
Brisa. Well, first of all, I have to say I have a lot to learn just in listening to you guys. And I don't work at the Hanford site. I've never done anything related to the work that you all do. And I sit here and I'm like, wow, what did I get myself into? I am no scientist, and I hope I can, catch up and be at the same speed as everyone here. But what really drew my attention to this HAB is just really, what does the outside person like myself think of? What is Hanford? What is it that they do? Because when you don't work there, you're just like, they just go to work. They're doing this cleanup, but it's very basic. So I guess for me, joining this was more, what can I take for somebody who has no science background, no nothing, and how can I, in my words, dumb it down so that they can understand it? Because sometimes we get too technical that it's like so much gets lost in translation. And being a leader to me is not necessarily always having a word, but I think for me, what it's taught me is to really listen. And the times that I will stand up is when I don't agree with something, but it's not to create an argument. It's really just to say, I voiced my opinion. And if you decide to do something else, that's on you, because I said, my piece here. And so, I do have direct reports, and oftentimes it's really about just listening, guiding, and really understanding what is that end goal and how are you going to get there. So I might not say a lot when we're in these meetings because I'm just trying to absorb it all in. But I guarantee you, once it all clicks, I may have, some questions, but I'm just here to bring, what does the community that doesn't know anything, what can we do differently to bring that awareness to them? So thank you.
Tim.
So most of you know, I work for the tree fruit industry. I have a public at large seat. But the main reason why, when I was given the opportunity to join the board, was thinking back to, gosh, I forget what year, 11, 12, 13, somewhere in that window. There was a leak in one of the tanks, and Governor Inslee went out to the press and started talking about it. And most of Washington ag is exported. So a lot of foreign buyers put two and two together. Oh my Lord, Washington crops are being irrigated with contaminated water, and started canceling purchases, even though we all know that was not the case. So it took a lot of undoing of, unfortunately, Governor Inslee's unmeasured remarks to get all of our, not only in the tree fruit industry, but the potato and hop, and you go down the litany of the crops. So my goal is kind of that communication piece of like, we need good, accurate information. I think Chris kind of brought that up with the Annette Carey story, that a lot of those rumors do a lot of harm that hurt folks that aren't directly involved in the Hanford cleanup project. So that's kind of the perspective that I try to bring to the group, and kind of I don't know if it's a funny story or not. It doesn't put me in the best of light, but in a previous lifetime, I used to work for former Congressman Hastings, and I worked back in DC when he was the chairman of the Natural Resources Committee. And actually, I think tomorrow is actually Doc's birthday. but we did a birthday fundraiser for him at the Capitol Hill Club, or we put it on. Him and there were a couple other members of Congress, Republicans, that had birthdays on the same day. And so that evening we were up having a good time at the Capitol Hill Club um, for the fundraiser. And I noticed then Congressman, now Senator Peter Welch walks in, who's a Democrat from Vermont. And the Capitol Hill Club is the Republican club. And I go to, and Doc's standing next to me, and I say, Doc, what the heck is, Mr. Welch doing here? This is the Republican club. Why is he here? It's like, oh no, Peter's my friend. I invited him to come over here and enjoy the evening with all of us. And it was kind of that, awe moment of like, regardless of your political persuasion, Doc, a fairly conservative Republican, and Mr. Welch, a fairly liberal Democrat, but they still could be friends and still disagree, but then figure out where consensus was. So I kind of think of that story from time to time as we have these conversations of not everything's going to be perfect, but we need to try to get to the correct end game.
All right, we would like to just check in for people who haven't spoken yet. If you want to pass, feel free to pass, but if you'd like to weigh in, Pam or Kermit, Rebecca, Mia, I don't think we've heard from you. Does anyone want to weigh in? Do you want to pass? We'll start at this side of the table. Anyone? All right, go ahead, Kermit, and then we'll go to Pam.
I'll go ahead and take a couple of minutes. My background is, I've been involved in business and consulting for most of my life. So, this whole Hanford advisory, the whole idea of being an advisor, rather than a decision maker, just requires a little bit of a transition. And I imagine that there are a lot of people on the board, that kind of face the same thing. Most of us as managers, you define the issue, you calculate, you devise a solution, then you go out and you make it happen. And so I guess for me, part of the experience shaping, mentality shaping thing, just comes from, that transition, from having to assume a role, in a group, rather than, being able to, determine course and determine outcomes and all of that. I think the other thing, though, just as far as leadership goes, in the context of the Hanford Advisory Board and representing the Nez Perce tribe, is just recognizing the idea that, there are a number of competing priorities here. If you're from a municipality or a county, a private business, the public at large, and so on. We all do represent, competing values to a certain extent. And so in a leadership context, I think a lot of times we just have to buy into, to me, I'm at an age where you call it the Reagan rule. I don't know what it's called, in a modern context, but remember Reagan always talked about the 80-20 rule. 80% of everything, we're not going to agree on. So we focus on that 20%, of the things that we do agree on, because that's where we're able to make progress. So in the context of the Hanford Advisory Board, with the Nez Perce tribe, our value is on, restoration, and preservation and so on. The tribe's stated vision for the Hanford site is that they would like it to return to the pre-Hanford condition, okay, which, that's a real heavy lift, and it does conflict with, some of the other priorities here. Other people are looking for development and business opportunity and things like that, when we're still just looking for that restoration. And so the leadership challenge in all of this, and I guess just considering that it's the 30th anniversary, 30 years seems like a long time, to those of us that, who have been involved in anything for 30 years. And, I look around the room and some of you have made comments about, being involved, for all of these years. And I just imagine that Well, yeah, we were all young once. We probably saw the world differently 30 years ago than we do now. But the reality of it is the issue hasn't changed, in 30 years. I mean, in the context of Hanford, 30 years is, not even the tick of the second hand, of the clock. So the leadership challenge in all of this is to make sure that, we are true to our values, that we represent the desires, the goals of the organizations that we represent, that we do that in a respectful way, but that we maintain that consistency, so 30 years from now, the Nez Perce Tribe's values will still be the same. We'll still be looking for restoration and preservation and all of that. So I guess maybe one of the things that, I ask, in a leadership context is just that we all respect the idea that we all represent competing priorities. There are going to be a lot of things that we don't agree on, that 80%. But, in my experience so far, in my limited experience with the board, I have seen, everybody respect those differences and try and focus on that percent. So I guess that would be my advice, is make sure we know what that 20% is that we do agree on, and try and focus on those things that we can actually achieve.
Thank you. And we have Pam, James, and Dan.
When I was in high school, I ran for a student body office and was the treasurer for my high school. And I don't know if it's still the case, but in those days, there was a leadership training camp for students who'd been elected to leadership throughout the state of Washington. And it was one of the most fascinating experiences for me that stayed with me. One exercise that they put us through was that we were members of a jury. And they'd taken one person aside and said, "You're going to hold to this position." And so that was, this person was not going to change their mind. And so working through the conversation and, not comprehending how something that was so black and white and this person was not going to change their mind, was very interesting. Another thing that I learned that has been useful to me is if you are tackling a problem with a group, put yourself forward and put something down on paper as a starting point. And that helps you in laying out what you think is interesting. And it gives a starting point to conversation and compromise. And I've continued to do that. My background is I have an MBA and my career was economic development for many years at the state and local level in Oregon and Washington. I was actually executive assistant to the Oregon Director of Economic Development, which was pretty fascinating. And I applied to Richland for an economic development position. And they called me up and they said, "Well, we've looked at your background and you've been the lobbyist for the Washington Community College system. You've worked with Congress, you've done this, you've done that. And we've got this other job. And if you'll take it, we'll just give it to you." And I said, "Well, what is it?" And they said, being director of the Hanford communities and working on Hanford cleanup. And my response was, yuck, I didn't want to deal with nuclear waste. But I was like, okay, we'll take this on. So it was my opportunity to work with the elected officials in this region, the city elected officials, the county elected officials, and help them understand what was going on at Hanford so that they could respond to their constituents with knowledge about what was going on, or to receive input and to bring it to all of us to collectively work on. And so one of my priorities was drinking water. City of Richland draws its drinking water from the Columbia River right south of Hanford. So is that drinking water okay? And how do I provide information to the people in this region that it's okay to drink the water? Emergency response was another issue. Is it dangerous to live here? What is the system to deal with emergencies? So I volunteered to work with Benton County Emergency Management and be the local government liaison to work on drills for both Energy Northwest and Hanford. State of Oregon also participates in those. And it was very informative to me to understand what the risks were and how those risks were dealt with and what would happen if something bad happened. And I was very impressed with the planning, the technical analysis, and the way that this region would come together. Interestingly, one of the most serious threats is a breach of a dam, not Hanford, because the federal building goes underwater to the 5th floor within 3 days. I moved my safe deposit box to a new location, and that was above the flood level. Anyway, and so in coming into the HAB, which was so contentious, I got to be friends with people. Jerry Paulette can make me absolutely nuts, but we've gotten to be friends. And we have different viewpoints, different political beliefs. Well, not so much political, but anyway, and the friends that I've made are lifelong, and I've really appreciated it. And I've appreciated the opportunity to be in leadership from a committee standpoint and national liaison. And as national liaison, I've been to most of the other sites. I know the community leaders in those places, and we are tied together. So my elected position gives me the opportunity to share with you, like my example of Oak Ridge. I get it just pounded on those people. It's like, build a landfill. And we also had an opportunity to work with the Japanese and the cleanup of Fukushima. They didn't want a landfill. And you can't clean up if you don't have any place to put what's contaminated. So we brought them to Hanford. We took them to Erdov. And they started working together as communities and formed a kind of Hanford communities for the people around Fukushima. So thank you.
We have James and Dan, and I want to check into with Jeff and Charles and see if you want to be added to the queue. So James, go ahead.
I was never a good manager.
Oh, wait, we're gonna.
Management's an art and I don't have any talent for it, but that's okay. I did okay. But I did find that if you base whatever decisions you can on science, that it'll be better and cheaper and faster. If you don't, you're just going to waste time wandering around, trying to re-engineer nature, and that never works. So, and it's kind of funny to think, how science enters into the decision-making process, and mainly it's just ignored, which is okay. It doesn't make me feel bad anymore. Second, comes after you've made the decision. So you make a decision for some other reason, and then you turn to the scientists and engineers and say, make it work, which is okay. That's what the Apollo program was, actually. It was not a scientific decision. It was a military political decision to beat the Russians to the moon, but it's okay. It worked out great. And then third, you actually make the decision based on science, which is kind of like what WIP was, and what I think Hanford's going to be. And then if you do that, you'll actually save time and money. And it's always the best way to do it. Thanks.
Dan?
I certainly agree with Jim Conca on a lot of that. An experience that shaped my values and how I lead. I'm going to start by just mentioning a definition. Actuaries are mathematicians who evaluate risks of one kind or another to help insurance companies set their prices so they can make a profit and stay in business. So the idea is you have to figure out how big the risk is likely to be, for example, automobile crashes, and then set your insurance rates based on that. So actuaries have been doing quantitative risk assessment for more than a century. There is no emotional component in their decisions. If you're going to be an actuary at an insurance company, you leave your emotions at home. In 1977, and this is where I started being influenced, the International Commission on Radiological Protection published radiation protection guidance for the first time that used quantitative and probabilistic risk assessment. ICRP stated that radiation protection should be done to make radiation work as safe as other professions that were considered to be safe. And in 1977, that meant that you had, the number was 1 in 10,000 chance in your career of dying on the job. So that was considered in 77 to be a safe profession. I think now we would say probably more like 10 to the minus fifth, 1 in 100,000. But values have changed since then. So in 1979, a brilliant physicist named Bernie Cohen at the University of Pittsburgh published his first catalog of risks, which compared various risks such as smoking, driving a car with or without seatbelts, alcohol use, chemicals, radiation, diseases. Well, I think I mentioned smoking, but yes, I think that was the first one. Decades of quantitative risk assessment followed. And I was involved, I was a charter member of the Society for Risk Analysis in 1984, I think it was. There have been many studies of risk perception as well, and the heyday of this was in the 70s and the 80s. And many of these studies focused on the disconnect between actuarial risks and the perceived size of those risks. We learned, for example, that risks can be dreaded or familiar. An example of a dreaded risk is radiation or snake bite, for example. Familiar risk, car accidents. People don't think, not even everybody wears seatbelts. I mean, these are very common things. Another distinction was, is a risk imposed or is it voluntary? That makes a factor of somewhere between 1,000 and 1,000,000 in what risk you're going to accept. So radiation and chemical exposures from discharges from Hanford are imposed risks from the point of view of members of the public. You don't have any choice. It's there, take it or leave it. It's like, oh wait, it's just like natural background radiation too, which is an imposed risk, but nobody cares. I mean, raise your hand in here. Have you had your house tested for radon, indoor radon, which provides, you know, most of our radiation exposure from background? And if you haven't had your living place tested, why do you care about radiation at Hanford? Well, obviously it's the imposed versus a voluntary risk. So I learned to be sensitive to the different valuations of risks to human health and willingness to pay for risk avoidance or risk mitigation. So to conclude, to have any meaningful dialogue about managing human risks, health risks, I'm talking about now, from Hanford, we have to understand stakeholders' valuations of risks. I have learned to separate actuarial risks from perceived risks. I make my decisions about spending based on actuarial risks. So let me just leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you. And Charles?
Well, it's a pleasure to be here. I guess what struck me, first of all, about the Hanford thing is that there's a good potential for not just to have, but the whole Hanford enterprise. Oh, sorry. Is that better? Okay. If I can hear myself reverberate, then maybe you can hear me too. I'll start again. Hanford could be insular. It can be focused inwardly and basically get disconnected from a wider world. Yet we need to attend to the wider world to pay attention to what's going on in a world bigger than Hanford. And I think the HAB board is in a good position with its diversity of people to attend to the wider world in their own domains and in other domains. and try to remind the enterprise that there's a bigger world or political, corporate, environmental stuff going on, up to modern geopolitics and more. If we can pay attention to that, maybe we can be more effective. Then changing the subject, there were so many good ideas coming out here from this discussion. How can they be captured? Is it possible to put them on a blog, on a website? Is that part of the idea? And finally, this is going to give advice, which I'm humbly offer. I don't know if HAB is supposed to be an advocate of anything or not. I know it's an advocate of good advice. It has to be that. But one thing about advocacy, you got to be clear about it. If you're going to advocate something, be clear about it. And you can get to clarity through discussion. I'm thinking that if maybe that can be part of the practice, that might hopefully lead us to better outcomes. And that's about what I have to offer today. Thank you.
Thank you. And we just want to open the floor. If anybody hasn't weighed in yet, Jeff?
Was just thinking about some of the future challenges for Hanford, like the design and construction of the high-level waste facility, and the grout versus vitrification issues. And so for me, share an experience. I went to work for a startup company in 2000. It was started by two Berkeley physics professors, and it was all about new nanostructured materials. And we worked, myself and a team of scientists, worked on this project for 3 years. We got 6 patents. We had a $3 million grant from the US Department of Energy. We had contracts with Daimler, Benz, and with GM's Opel division in Germany. And we got to the point where we were really moving on this project. It was automotive hydrogen storage was the project. And the venture capitalists pulled the plug on the project. And the reason was that the market was more than 10 years out, and venture capitalists, of course, want to make money sooner, not later. So the lesson learned there is that investment in front-end engineering, if you will, really spending time on the science and technology development on the front end can save a lot of money and time on the back end. And I think at Hanford, the high-level waste facility, I mean, that was a financial and technical disaster back in the whatever 2010, 2012 timeframe. And I don't think the project can afford to do anything like that in the future. So we need to make sure that on the really key things that we're going to spend money on, that this board provides. We're not supposed to provide oversight, but in reality, that is kind of what we do. We listen to presentations, we ask questions, and hopefully helpful questions to make the people, the engineers and the scientists working on it really understand and think about what they're doing, so that we don't make multi-billion-dollar mistakes on Hanford. Our startup, of course, lasted a couple more years before it went under, but that's the end of my story.
Thank you, Jeff. So anyone else want to provide their thoughts or their experience? Mia.
I can share. So my background is very different from this. I worked for 10 years in kitchens as a chef, and it may seem like a completely different world, but it's actually helped me a lot for the HAB. And while working in kitchens, you meet a lot of different people from many different backgrounds, different perspectives, different ways of working and thinking. And you can't, at the end of the day, you can't do it alone. You can't individually put out all of the things that are being asked of you on your own. And so you have to find a way to work together as a team, whether you like the people next to you or not. Maybe they wouldn't be your friends outside of work, but you have to find common ground and work together as a team to get the job done. And it's incredible that kind of life experience has prepared me for this, which is a totally different world and much more technical, a lot less on your feet, physical. But it's taught me a lot about how to work with people and bridge those gaps of different perspectives and understandings to find a way to come to consensus. And it's exciting that we have advice coming up this afternoon to talk through, because that's the beauty of the HAB is that advice process and consensus process.
Thank you, Mia. Anyone else around the table? How about, I'm going to put the front table on spot. Would any of you like to provide your insights and experience? Don't all run to the mic at once.
I guess really quick, but before I want to circle back to some things that Steve, Michelle, Risa said, and others. It's important to hear, for us to hear those perspectives, and not technically, not always technically based, but what you're hearing from your constituents and what you want to be able to tell your constituents, right? That's another very important mission of the board, not just advice to us, but also having us help you help your constituents with information. So, I've heard a lot of things around the table, the listening and it's not just blood, it's help on that paper. A variety of things that have kind of similar to my own experiences and things that I have to keep reminding myself. And the one thing that I have always tried to my philosophy has always been lead, follow, or get out of the way, right? That's what I have to do. And I actually, as a regulator, as with EPA, I still do that, right? It's like, okay, is this a place where we can lead? Is this where we should follow? Or is this sometimes where we just need to get out of the way? And be honest with ourselves when that's the right answer. And also, again, leadership does not always mean a manager, right? There's a lot of organizations that say, all our employees are leaders, whether they're managers or not. And so I actually believe that can be true. It has to be fostered, and the organization has to be willing to follow those leads, but it can still very much be true. Thanks. Could I ask a follow-up question? The Oregon Hanford Cleanup Board and the Oregon Department of Energy is preparing an annual update to the Oregon State Legislature and the governor. What key message or messages do you think we should include in that update?
I'd have to think about that and get back to you. But I will.
I'll just echo a lot of what others around the room have said. Really, really great comments all around the table. And I want to echo also what Dave just said, not to be a copycat. So I won't go into those kind of details. A couple things that kind of came to my mind, particularly when I work with my team and the work I do. One of the most important things I really try and keep in mind is listening to understand and not listening to respond. I think those are two very different things where, again, you're really listening to understand the issue and really hear where somebody's coming from rather than you're listening just to spit out like a response to, like basically show your point of view or something. The other big component I think I've seen, especially in my time at ecology and as I shifted from my old position into my management position, and then looking at David's leadership the last 3 years, is the really high importance of relationship building with your team, and then with the public, with stakeholders, just with all the different folks that you work with. I think it's really important to build, really good working relationships, because helps you better understand where they're coming from. Communication helps a lot, because it's one thing just to go send out a news release and hope it sticks on the wall somewhere, rather than building a relationship with the community that you're working with, and building a presence and building trust and transparency. So I think that's something I'm constantly working to improve, is the relationships I have with all of you, with the public, with my team, with our staff in headquarters, with Department of Energy, EPA, just everybody. So I think that's a really important thing that I think about when I think about leadership, is relationship building and listening to understand.
Thank you, Ryan. So for me, I'm going to kind of divert from Ryan and Dave's message and kind of focus more on the question that we have here, which was, what is an experience or insight that shapes your values and how you lead? And I think back to 20 years ago, I was in college and I decided, you know what? I think I want to study abroad. And I picked a program and bought my plane ticket, and away I went. And I was the only one from my university who went. There were, I think, just under 100 of us, and they put us in a castle. We went to school there. We traveled on the weekends. But the biggest part for me was stepping outside my comfort zone in a place where I knew nobody, and I was in a brand new culture, something I've never done before, and building relationships and getting to know people and really understanding their values and what was important to them. And I think that as I've progressed through my career, one of the things that I truly enjoy about working with the HAB is really hearing everyone's perspectives and seeing the consensus process and seeing all of the different values come around the table and putting something forward that is constructive and actionable. The process is really cool to watch. And so I think that as we continue to move forward, one of the things that I would like to see continuing to lead is to see everybody welcome our new members and their new values and their new perspectives and continue on that consensus process.
Roberto? Or do you want to pass?
I'll just add can you hear me? Yeah, okay. Yeah, I'll just add something real short. It's been pretty much reminiscent to what Lindsay had just mentioned. So what was an experience or insight that shaped my values and how I lead? Personally, the biggest experience that impacted my values and my leadership style was from my Peace Corps service in Paraguay. And just like with Lindsay, we got to grow up with the community. We got to learn the lifestyle, learn the interests, learn what was important to them, not just culturally, but also in terms of the various aspects of a specific project that we were undertaking. So yeah, just from there, I was able to translate all of that experience within grad school and within DPA here. But yeah, it's all in all, it's just tying it down together to relationship building, community building, and community connections as well, which is what I think is important here with the HAB.
Thank you. So I'm not excluded. I'm going to go ahead and throw my thoughts in. I grew up in kind of an interesting environment. My parents were military. I'm the oldest child. And strangely enough, I was taught to constantly question and ask the question, why? which is kind of counterintuitive with the military environment. Then I turned around and went into the military and continued to ask why. And I was very lucky. I had a lot of really good bosses that encouraged that. And I spent, my career field is about 50% administrative, 50% technical, but it's not engineering technical. It's dealing with classified material, which is really kind of unique. But my bosses, I had one boss flat out tell me one time, your job is to keep me out of jail. And part of that is asking why and challenging the because. That's the way it's always been done, and the status quo, to kind of get to the root of why people are doing what they're doing, because the only way you protect against human beings making mistakes is you've got to recognize they are human beings. They do not intend to make mistakes, but you have to put into place systems and processes that will adapt to the human being, not try and force them. So I spent 20 years on in active duty and reserves, constantly asking why, and being blessed by bosses that expected me to ask why. And then as a manager, that was one of the biggest transitions that staff, when I would go into organizations and I would be put into a management position, and inherit staff that weren't used to that culture, help them grow and learn, because I would say, why? And they were not used to thinking that way. So I found that it stretched them by knowing I'm going to ask why. So they had to go and do the homework and figure it out, which taught them to really understand and learn what they were doing, instead of just what the directive says and the order says. They've got to understand the why, which means that they learn. And it's been a really great experience, a very collaborative experience, because then 10 years down the line, they know why they're doing what they're doing. And you get into an environment that is unique, and you've got to figure out how to adapt. And if you don't understand the why, goes full circle back to the why, then you can't do it. You're almost doomed to failure. So yeah, my favorite word is why, because change is constant. And if you don't know the why you're doing something, you can't work with it. So I think unless someone online. Okay, Judy, did you want to say anything? Or did you want to pass?
The only thing the most important lesson I learned is what I mentioned at the start of the meeting, is the importance of giving people space to change their mind, so that if there's options, sometimes we just need to dig in the heels and stay where we are, but giving people the option to move to a different place can really be so rewarding for someone to have that opportunity to move.
Thank you. Okay, did you want to okay, moving topics. So we'll kind of close this topic out. Yes. Judy?
We're going to distribute. So Josh emailed this out. This is the HAB contact list designed to be shared amongst HAB members only, not for further distribution. And while you have that in an email, we're also going to give you the hard copy. And with that, Susan will talk about the agenda going forward.
Well, sort of with you too. Well, yeah. Okay, so next on the agenda, we're running ahead of schedule. So, but the next on the agenda is the HAB photo. So we can get our annual group photo. So we'll take a couple of minutes. Judy, where do you want to take the photo? Mary Ann? So, okay, so we're going to do the photo. That should, right now, we're scheduled for lunch at 12:45, but we're obviously ahead of schedule. So as soon as we get the photo out of the way, we'll determine what time we're going to reconvene. We'll break for lunch and we'll reconvene, figure out what time we're at, reconvene. And then this afternoon is to be spent working on the draft advice.
Apparently not.
Heard you.
I hear you now.
Oh, yay, thank you. Okay, thanks for flagging that for our attention. We're just starting the discussion. You're seeing me track the comments real time.
Just to finish up, I conclude that the reason why we added this was simply because it's a value of our constituencies. And keeping it nice and broad like this, because, the idea is even the car traffic, the 3,000 people that drive out there, the whole thing should be factored in this overall gross estimate of the contribution of that facility to the big picture. I think that's pretty much is what we're intending. I realize that this would be a multi-year study program to get the data necessary to make this happen. So it's definitely a long-term action. And as I was explaining is that alternative generation capacity would be huge amount of impact on the cost of the project. Installing, instead of, steam boilers, you would have electric boilers running off of a turbine generator. So it just, and that had to be natural gas fueled, and it's just, there's not a lot of gas out there to run those things. So the reason why it was nixed by DOE is it was just so cost prohibitive to convert all the way over. And so it was a consideration in the design of the WTP project for a while, but it just became way too big.
Still isn't natural gas capacity.
Let's get the queue. And so James and then Dan.
This really doesn't belong in this at all, because this is a much higher level that has to do with the state CETA legislation and all that kind of stuff. And if you take it to the logical point, the VIT plant should be run by a small modular reactor, a small high temperature reactor, if you really want this to do. But that's way above, the policy discussion here, because gas is just another greenhouse, contributor. So spending all this time and effort moving over to gas, you should just get rid of all of that. And you're not going to use renewables because the VIT plant needs reliable energy. So you're kind of left with a more philosophical debate that I don't really think should be in here.
I'd just like to remind people that if we can't agree on a specific priority, it gets dropped off the list. So where we are and what I'm hearing right now is that there's no agreement on this item.
Dan, did you want to speak to that?
So the question then is for Jim. If we changed it to just evaluate alternate energy sources for the steam generators of the DF-LAW and just be specific to the steam generators, we're not advocating for a specific energy source, but we're just trying to reduce the carbon footprint of those generators. Is that acceptable and high level enough, or is it the DF-LAW as a whole that you're objecting to, or is it just the way it's worded?
I guess that's okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Judy, if you can take off, evaluate greenhouse gas emissions and identify strategies too. No, up, top line.
Just say this, but.
Yep, take off all the black words there.
It's DF-LAW, and was there a word after that?
Nope, that's period.
Okay.
And Judy, you will have to update the table as well.
Sure. Thank you for that reminder.
Not necessarily in real time.
Right.
So everyone can live with what's on the screen now. Okay.
Okay, next item. address the extent of contamination at the 324 building through an amended record of decision or other comprehensive environmental response composition liability act product, CERCLA. So this was an item that the various committees spent quite a bit of time on and expanded it to the wording here. Okay, next one. Proceed with the full.
My card's up. I think you should just leave it to say, address the extent of contamination at the 324 building without defining how that has to be done.
We consulted with the Environmental Protection Agency on this, and that's why CERCLA was added.
I would like to suggest that we say under the 324 building instead of at the 324 building.
Okay. Next, proceed with the full deactivation, demolition, and removal of the 105 kW fuel storage
Say something
basin.
still here. I was hoping
Thank you,
to
Steve.
have mine.
Yep.
Before we get, sorry, Jeff. Just the comment came up today about the 324 and that they hope to have this question resolved by the end of this fiscal year. Are we going to be kind of, in terms of talking about 26, stating things that will already have taken place?
I think the expectation was that there will not be an amended record of decision. Well, it says address the extent of contamination through an amended ROD. So the amended ROD could happen prior to 2026, but address the extent of the contamination is the kind of operative phrase.
Jeff, just from the notes, this morning's comment was that by the end of the year, there would likely be a plan. And so the addressing the issue would happen after the plan.
Yeah, I'm okay with it being here. I'm just thinking it's probably going to be water under the bridge. And that's fine, as long as it's completely done in 26, but I would think if they don't get it done in 24, they'll get it done in 25.
And the clarification is we're not saying do the amended ROD in 26. We're saying address the contamination in accordance with the amended ROD in 26. If that's.
Okay, yeah, you're right. It's taking it further. Thanks.
And the underlying theme in these critical priorities, cleanup priorities, are this is the HAB going on record in this instance saying that 324 building contamination is important to us.
No, I get it. I appreciate it. Thanks.
Okay, moving on. Proceed with the full deactivation, demolition, and removal of the 105 kW fuel storage basin. Next, accelerate groundwater remediation efforts in the river corridor. And this is another one where DOE and the agencies are addressing groundwater remediation in the river corridor, but we want to go on the record that this is an important priority for 2026. Next, develop methods to remediate contamination in the Central Plateau Deep Vados zone. Implement the approved record of decision remedies for the 100K and 100N areas. Initiate the certification and shipment of certified transuranic waste isolation pilot plant.
Josh, do you have that question? Go ahead, open the mic, who's ever put that on? Oh, I'm not clear what you meant by develop methods to remediate contamination in the deep beta zone. Are you talking about implementation of new technology?
Tom,
Hey,
can you?
real quick, I just want to interject. Dee, we saw your question, but you're not a HAB member and you're also not a current member of the agency. I think that's something we could bring up during public comment. Yeah, I just want to make sure we're following the process.
No problem.
Thank you.
Can I comment a little bit? We had a nice presentation at a meeting here not too long ago where the transuranic waste situation was explained to us, talking about certification of the containers. And maybe I was wrong, but I interpreted that certification has got to come from New Mexico, not from us here.
Yes.
And that they have to bring people from New Mexico up and certify these as being acceptable. So if we understand this to be that's true, then by 26, and we're supposed to ship them at 28, that's 2 years in advance, correct?
Yeah, and we're asking for an acceleration there, and it would have to be local DOE coordinating with Carlsbad Field Office as well.
Right, but will Carlsbad have the staff available to do it? That's the hinge that we
is.
understood, and
we
DOE here can't do anything about that.
Yeah, and we've heard a couple times that there could be capacity in Carlsbad to get stuff off-site sooner. They're committed to 28, but there could be an opportunity to slip a couple trips in. So what this is requesting is that we're ready to go if Carlsbad has an opening, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I remember during the tanks meeting suggesting that we change the initiate to accelerate.
Okay, any objections to that change in language? Okay. Moving on, complete a preliminary design for the remediation of the 61811 burial ground.
Concern?
Yes.
Okay. So the 61811 burial ground is in a parking lot of the waste street of the Energy Northwest nuclear power plant. And DOE cannot remediate the 61811 burial ground without causing enormous damage, probably shutting down that facility. When you think about the burial ground across from the 300 area and how many times contamination blew across the road from that project. So it's a waste of money at this point in time to do a design for remediation of 61811, and I will block consensus on this one.
Pam, these are word for word from milestones that DOE and agencies have agreed to. And when you look at the table, it says that the plans have to align with Energy Northwest. But these are milestones, and they're taken word for word from the milestones. And the milestones are for 2026.
Well, I think it's a waste of money, and I think the milestones need to be changed.
But that's what the milestones say.
But I heard you say that you can't live with it as it's written, so we should either modify it or remove it. Anyone have any modifying language?
There's a comment from Dan Solitz. Is he a member of the IM team?
Dan Solitz is a member of the IM team, but he's not a member of the board, so.
Okay.
That's tricky.
So can we just use the DOE language and say, develop a plan for they do a lot of plan development.
Right, and that's what it says on the table. And this is supposed to be a one-line simplification of the text in the table.
Got it.
So Pam, this is not a priority. We should delete this altogether, despite the fact that it is a agency approved milestone.
I think it's a waste of money.
We have a comment. There's an alternate from the Yakama Nation serving today, and they have a comment in the queue. McClure Tosh.
Hi, it's McClure Tosh, Yakama Nation ERWM alternate for the HAB for Yakama Nation. So I wanted to say a couple things about the 61811 burial ground since I was on site with EPA and DOE and contractors this last summer at this particular waste site, talking about why it's important. So I want to clarify the 61811 burial ground is not within the parking lot. It's actually to the west of the parking lot. The entire burial ground is outside of the parking lot. The concern is that groundwater is flowing through the 61811 burial ground in a way that it is carrying high levels of contamination towards Energy Northwest and the parking lot that's there. The next step that's proposed by EPA and DOE, they're in consensus on this, is actually doing more investigation with monitoring wells, because right now they only have one monitoring well in the 61811. It's between the eastern side of the burial ground and going towards Energy Northwest. So that's really the next step there. I think cleanup and all that kind of stuff is going to come later. So if there's any way to change the language to clarify that we should be supporting DOE and EPA in their efforts and all the tri-parties to investigate this so we can understand what to do, I think would be the way to go rather than just sort of saying cleanup, because it does get complicated as you get into existing infrastructure on another facility. But at the same time, we shouldn't do nothing, because some of the levels of contamination that are seen in the one well that they do have are really, really high and are very concerning. So I just wanted
So
to
this is a marker for 2026. So 2 years in the future.
Yeah, and I don't even know if they're going to be ready by then, because they are having to do some complicated planning on the well drilling, because if they wanted to do a full investigation, they would actually have to drill wells on Energy Northwest property, which requires NRC to get involved since they're part of the operation of that facility. And that could take 2 years in itself just to get well locations approved.
So the HAB, as this advice is written, says that by the end of 2026, we would like to see a preliminary design based on investigation work done between now and then. So you would like to push that off to 2027 or 2028?
I think I would say we would like to encourage a full investigation so a design can be done, and not put a date on the design, but like over the next 2 years, try to get the wells installed so they can get to doing a design would be what I would recommend.
Okay, but this is for 2026, not 24 or 25.
Yeah, that's fine. I mean, there's a lot that could happen between now and 26 for design. So I don't know if like trying to complete their investigation to be able to get to a design, but there's a lot going on there. So anyways, I don't know if that's helpful or not, but I just wanted to let people know that the actual waste site is not within the parking lot. The source material is not in the parking lot. We're talking about stuff migrating from an upgradient site to the parking lot due to groundwater flow. I think this recommendation should be focused on getting the data so then they can do a design, in 2027 or whatever.
That's very helpful. Chris, since you originated this, would you suggest a change in language?
I think as long as it's consistent with the milestones as written, that's fine with me.
But the milestones call for a preliminary design.
Could we try complete a preliminary design for groundwater investigation? No? Dave?
Yeah, thanks. So yeah, I was involved in the negotiation of those milestones, and it's because of the nitrate and tritium that is continuing to release from that burial ground and contaminating groundwater that will reach the river, that we are, that project is already long overdue. And we negotiated those milestones and have some groundwater evaluation steps between now and then to find out if we need to do something sooner. And part of the design, to say that DOE will that the completion of the project will interfere with the reactor is unfair, right? They can use things like the ARP tents that were used in Idaho to control releases that were not done at 61810. So it can be done, it can be done safely, they just have to do it, and that's part of the design. And so I kind of stand behind the milestones, and the evaluations that we're doing is whether or not we have to do something sooner, because the DOE has put off historically even addressing the groundwater at all. So if they say, hey, I don't want to presuppose the outcome, because we have the decision on the books already that says they need to dig it out. There's nasty stuff in there that can't be allowed to stay.
So this priority as written supports a fairly aggressive EPA approach to cleaning up, well, investigating and then cleaning up the site.
Yeah.
So does the HAB support EPA in this, or would we like to back off and say that approach is perhaps too aggressive, or we think it's too aggressive?
It is, Ron. I would encourage the investigation is excellent. Completing a design seems premature.
What if we say complete an investigation to support a preliminary design?
I'm fine with that.
Okay. Any objections to that proposed language?
Design for remediation?
Yeah, or.
Judy, you have to help me up when those cards go up down there at that end. I can't really see them.
Is McClure still there? Is he okay with those words?
Yeah, I think so. I support everything that Dave Enan said about the aggressive stance. I also was just trying to be realistic too. So I think where this is headed is a good spot for the HAB to be, I think.
This is Chris. Actually, the wording in milestone MO 16-88 probably resolves the question. The wording is as follows: initiate remediation planning as well as coordination with Energy Northwest for remediation of 61811 burial ground. So it's initiate remediation planning, initiate coordination with Energy Northwest. And I don't think that places an undue acceleration on the agencies or DOE. I think those words are probably what we've talked about.
They are, and it supports a design in 27 and 28. I mean, I guess the other question for the board, particularly thinking of what Pam said, is she thinks that those milestones and so forth are the wrong place to be. Y'all have to decide if that's what you want to advise us. So that's a whole separate question, and this is not the time to bring that up, to address that, but.
Is this happening right now?
So Judy, where are we on the language currently?
What we had was complete an investigation to support a preliminary design for remediation of the 61811 burial ground. Chris read a milestone that included language on initiate remediation planning. I missed the other words. Do we want to make any changes or stick with complete an investigation to support a preliminary design for remediation?
Chris?
I don't like to see things slip. And one of the realities at this site is everything slips. Schedule always seems to slip. And I think somewhere along the line, we need to take a stance, and it's not acceptable to constantly let schedules slip. So my view is if the current milestone says submit this by 9/30/26 or something other time 26, then I think we ought to go by what those milestones say, because they were negotiated in good faith and with the schedule in mind. If they slip, they slip, but I think we ought to try and hold agencies' feet to the fire to try and meet them as long as the funding is available to do that. There's nothing that says final in here. All these milestones say preliminary, preliminary, and there's nothing wrong with preliminary.
So Chris, is the language on the board right now acceptable?
Could somebody
What
read
does
it?
it say?
I can't read it.
Yeah, needs to be bigger, please.
Just a second.
Complete a investigation to support a preliminary design for remediation of the 61811 burial ground.
Okay, I think we've got it.
So that's,
Pam, are you happy?
I'm not happy, but I'm not objecting.
Great.
So
Thank you
this-
very much.
this is what stands right now. It's highlighted. Thank you.
Okay, moving on. Use contaminated soil to minimize the demand for clean fill in ERDF. Establish disposition pathways for orphan waste streams. Accelerate transfer of waste encapsulation and storage facility WESF cesium and strontium capsules to dry storage. Access technologies to remove or stabilize interstitial liquids in waste storage tanks.
It just moves me around.
We're assessing technologies, right?
Yes, sorry, I think I misspoke. Okay, that is an overview and discussion of the 17 critical priorities. Susan?
Jeff,
Yes.
sorry. Can you define that for me as a layperson, the free and interstitial liquids? Are you talking about leaking liquids?
The, I would probably want to defer to Rob here on this since he's the expert.
Because the waste has got the 3 different layers to it, you've got the liquid supernatant, the salt cake, and the sludge. Well, that salt cake layer in particular is very porous. Okay, and over time, it sucks moisture out of the air and puts it in those interstitial spots, and it's just retained there. That's just naturally what happens in the daily warming and cooling of a closed space. So the interstitial liquids are the ones in between. They tend to build up, and we think that maybe they contribute to the leaking of the tanks, that especially the single shell tanks that we've seen so far. So we think it's or suspect that it's mostly the interstitial liquids that are leaching out and transporting radionuclides with it. So it's not a single solid mass. It's got a lot of porosity to it, maybe 50, 60% porosity.
So,
lots of water.
So is the
Two-
goal of this
Well,
priority?
there's kind of 2 ways to eliminate tank leaks. So if there's no liquid in the tank, there's not going to be a leak. So this would either immobilize or remove the liquids in the tank. The other is to, somehow improve the integrity of the tank. So this is, a major way of reducing the risk of tank leakage.
The interstitial liquids are liquids with the potential to leak.
So what about the tanks that are leaking? Does this priority get to that as well?
Yeah, it's to get all the liquids with the potential to leak out of the tanks, basically.
And coming up with the right, so we're saying here in the next 2 years, we want an analysis of what those technologies would be, which might mean actually trying to figure out and test some of those technologies. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Okay, if there are no additional comments or questions about the cleanup priorities, Susan, I think you had a proposal.
We have to walk through the background and advice paragraphs.
Yeah.
You got the meat of it.
So you want to read through this? Okay. I haven't had to do this much reading since the third or fourth grade, I think. So, background. This advice largely mirrors the goals outlined in DOE's current Hanford 5-year plan, as well as DOE's presentation of the 5-year plan to the public on October 24th, 2023. The key assumption of the advice is that DOE will request a compliant budget for fiscal year 2026, and that this advice will be provided to headquarters with the budget request as required by EM1. In addition to the activities identified in the 5-year plan placemat, the board stresses that key projects addressed in the following table require funding in fiscal year 2026 to ensure that they are completed on time or expedited to support or to shorten project duration. The board has consistently emphasized the importance of advocating for and requesting funding sufficient to meet all regulatory milestones and significantly shorten the duration for completion of cleanup activities. Any comments or questions on those two paragraphs? Advice. The board reliably supports the agency's request that its membership represents the project's best interest to its constituent organizations, elected officials, and the general public. However, the board notes that the response has not historically met board expectations. The board advises DOE to provide a response that complies with DOE Office of Environmental Management guidance. The board also requests a consolidated point-by-point response to this advice from the TPA agencies. The board would be open and willing to workshop the content of the response with the TPA agencies to ensure expectations are met. The board recognizes the importance of assuring the safe, secure, and compliant management of Hanford's critical resources and the maintenance of infrastructure, safeguards, and security. It is imperative that DOE continue to prioritize and implement Hanford worker and public safety practices, and to ensure that a stable, highly qualified workforce is available to safely execute the project to completion. The board advises the agencies to implement, develop, communicate a long-term workforce strategy as noted in advice point CD below. The table below summarizes the board's recommended cleanup priorities for fiscal year 2026. Note that the activities in the 5-year plan identified to be completed prior to fiscal year 2026 are not listed in this table. And then what follows in the document is the table of fiscal year 2026 cleanup priorities. So we've already reviewed simplified single sentence version of these 17 priorities. Is there anything in here that we need to spend additional time on?
I do have.
Do we need to update the ones that we updated in the bullet list in the
Yes.
table? Okay.
Rob?
Do you want to take, do you just want to pause for a few minutes while we do that?
Rob's got it. Rob?
Yeah, I just, I guess a clarification. The paragraphs under the advice title there, is that part of the advice that goes along with all of our bullets?
Yes. Yeah, these are a couple pieces of advice that would not be called a cleanup priority.
Okay, but they are part of the advice that we are
Yes.
presenting to the
Yes.
DOE. Okay.
So can we take 5 minutes to take a 5-minute break, update the table? And I think at that point we would be, Susan, ready to approve it.
We do have a quorum, so realistically, if everybody can live with it, AKA we have a consensus. Mia?
I have one edit. It's really minor, but on WT-A, can we put DF law and then a colon so that it has a header? It's the only one that's missing it. So before complete the hot commissioning, we would put DF law, colon. Yep. Thank you.
Yes, Rob?
Yeah, I accidentally let this word go through earlier. But on the very last one, WMF, the word freezing should be removed. That's not a real viable technology. Not on carbon steel tanks.
Well, the question there, Rob, was I understand that it could cause cracking of the tanks. At least that was a concern. But if the contents are frozen, it wouldn't matter. I think this is a technology evaluation. It's not a solution. And some of these proposed technologies might not be viable, but no one's looked at it. So the point is we would, and as it's phrased, we would like DOE to look at a fairly broad range of technologies. And these are examples.
All right.
I'm sorry, wait,
Sometimes you have to give them something, right? I mean, yeah, freezing won't work, and then they can tell us that.
Can we get rid of freezing?
I guess we're getting rid of freezing.
delete freezing?
No, I think it's great. Got to give them something
Leave
to.
freezing in, okay.
Okay, let's take a 5-minute, Tom, yes, sorry.
So question, if we have a quorum and we decide to move forward today, do we give the people who aren't here, who are planning on coming tomorrow to weigh in on consensus, an opportunity to revisit it if they have something they can't live with because it's on the agenda for approval tomorrow? So we could,
I'm seeing people shaking their head no.
why not? It's on the agenda for tomorrow.
Because we're here today, we might not have a quorum tomorrow. In fact, I don't think we're going to have a quorum tomorrow.
Yes, and I'm saying my proposal is at the end of the day, if we still have quorum and we agree to pass this forward, we just give a 5-minute check-in tomorrow to make sure that nobody has anything that they would have blocked the advice over. Because that's just.
Well, if we have a quorum today and there's agreement, they can't block it tomorrow because it's done deal.
Just feels a little iffy for me, but I'll go either way, but it's just, it feels process-wise a little funky.
I mean, process-wise, once we've got consensus on a document.
Yeah, with a quorum, it passes, all right.
Right, we have quorum, we have consensus, it's approved. The only thing that's going to be done to it after that point is Josh will do a clean edit and make sure the addressees and CCs and all that stuff is up to date.
And find Ike White's memo.
And Ike White's memo. But yeah, we're just more efficient than we anticipated. So 5-minute break?
Please.
Okay.
McClure Tosh. So let's make sure.
Yeah. Okay, we ready to reconvene to see where we're at? Judy's done her thing.
As far as I can go.
So pull up a chair and let's roll through.
All right. So per the request, we have the subject here in WTA. We changed the text here under evaluate alternate energy sources. The category is still greenhouse gas emissions. Oh, what? I have no idea why that is. There we go. All right. Regarding under versus at, the language was already there for beneath, which I think gets to under.
Okay, let's go back real quick. WTP B. It is still entitled greenhouse gas emissions. Just want to make sure that there isn't a desire to change
Everything's
that.
good.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
All right, so beneath equals under. Here we have accelerate for true waste, accelerate the certification and shipment. Here on 61811 burial ground, this is the text that is consistent. This is stricken. Should this remain? That's the question, this first sentence. Sure. Continue the planning process for the remediation of the 61811 burial ground, parens TPA milestone M016088 end parens. Then the new sentence, complete an investigation to support a preliminary design for remediation of the 61811 burial ground. I'm seeing nods around the head. Nods of the head, retain it. That was the spirit of the conversation. Okay. And that was it. Those are the changes. There is a question online. Yes, online members or alternates representing their members for this meeting will be asked to vote.
So those were the table items that had changes. Did we want to look through the rest of the table just to make sure, because we sort of blasted through all that? Or do we want to just move forward?
Move forward.
Okay.
Jeff, it's your baby.
Susan, our work is done. We're turning it over to the chairman of the HAB now as a finished product.
You're turning it over to the HAB for consensus decision-making. Is that correct?
Yes.
Tom, you good?
Jeff was a good leader.
Okay, oh, hold on. We don't have it done yet officially. We don't have, yes, Amber. Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, that's for Jeff. Okay, yes. All right, Amber.
Sorry, just back to that last statement about the leaking, trying to remove liquid from the tanks.
Could you move closer to the mic?
Oh, yes, I can. Is there a reason why certain technologies were mentioned and not others? And I know the freezing is meh. So is there a reason why that the committee chose to list? I know it says such as, and you threw some in there. But there's been other conversations about other types of technologies, right? Like the pre-treating, like in the tank, things like that.
Yes. So several of the people involved in this effort are engineers, and we're curious why the agency, for example, hadn't used or hadn't evaluated superheated steam to dry out the tank. So it's the nerds in us wanted to give them a couple examples.
Okay, so the pre-treatment of cesium, other things in the tank, all those things are on the table. Just want to make
Absolutely.
sure that DOE
Yeah,
understands
yes.
that we're not just giving them a very short list of engineering.
It says at a minimum.
Okay, at a minimum. Okay, thank you.
So most of these tanks, though, have already been pumped dry or supposedly pumped dry. And so this is all stuff that's happened since then. And it's a huge startup thing to go pump them out again for an unknown amount that you would have in, you know, a dipstick. And so, so that's why, and it has been discussed, lots of it. And, you know, some people want to turn it into Jello, you know, so it doesn't leak or add other organics to it, which is forbidden, really. You don't want to do that. But anyway, yeah.
Okay. Are we good to go to consensus decision-making? All right. Do we have a consensus? Is there anyone that cannot live with this document as it is? Pardon? Okay, well, Rob, does everybody support this document? McClure? Larry? Anybody
Yes.
else online?
Was that McClure?
That was Larry. I supported.
Okay. McClure?
I missed the first like half of you guys going through it, but what I've seen, the changes that were made, I think those were good. I think we're fine. I think we're good. Support.
Thank you. And Jacob is weighing in that he supports it. So I believe we have an approved advice. Congratulations, Jeff and team.
Champion.
Okay, so we're ahead of schedule. So pat yourselves on the back. We're being incredibly efficient. So shortly we will adjourn for the day, but let's talk about tomorrow, since we have now just saved an hour out of the schedule. Have two options, a preferred option and another an alternative option. All right, we can move the committee updates, the status on previous action items up to that spot at 9:15, or we can move the overview of the TPA, CERCLA, and RECRA. I'm guessing we don't want to move the CERCLA tech TPA.
We cannot move the
Okay,
CERCLA and RCRA.
that's what I said. It's an option. It's not a preferred option. But I wanted to make sure it was thrown out there. So we can move the committee updates and then the status updates of previous action items up to 9:15, where the draft advice is.
Let's double check the time. So.
Judy's.
Okay.
Could we do committee updates now? Oh, never mind then.
Well,
Rob's not ready.
Okay, let's look at moving. Let's look at moving what tomorrow would be. Committee updates
is
half an
hour.
hour.
Then the status of updates, that was 15 minutes.
So we would move that
to 9:15 to that 1 hour
9:15,
spot.
Yep.
And that would,
We have a hard 10:15, so
right.
I think just
I mean,
extra break time.
or we move up the committee updates, some of the committee updates. I think we may have everybody here, but even still, whatever we don't finish by 3:15, we can then do tomorrow morning. And we can also move up HAB administrative business. And in a perfect world, we could possibly get done by lunchtime, and those traveling get on the road, those that need to go back to work can go back to work, and those that want to just enjoy the sunshine can enjoy the sunshine. Does that work?
So that the committee's points would be Tom presenting, Rebecca isn't here right now. Rob will want to go tomorrow, right?
Pam tomorrow? Pam
Rob
wants,
and Michelle, would you be ready to report today or tomorrow? Okay.
so Tracy's tomorrow and Pam is tomorrow. Tom and Rob, you guys are good to go right now?
Rob has tomorrow and Rebecca will have tomorrow.
Okay, then we're doing committee reports tomorrow.
Okay.
And I think we'll still probably get done around lunchtime-ish and hopefully be able to get you all out of here reasonably. Everybody good?
All right.
Party at Tagaris tonight,
And
5 o'clock.
what time? 5?
5. So hope to see everybody there. And is there anything that you guys would like to say? Lindsay?
We also have the HAB banner in the back of the room. If you have not signed it, please take the opportunity to grab a marker and sign your name. Thank you.
Ryan?
Unrelated, but if you have not taken the TPA public involvement survey, pretty, please take it by next Friday. Thank you.
Chris?
Regarding the party tonight, at 5 o'clock, just remember that all of Hanford is going to be leaving. So 240 is going to be jammed. If you have to go anywhere on G-Way or Jadwin, it's going to be jammed. So depending on where you live, you might want to leave a little earlier so you don't get caught up in everybody going home from Hanford and Battelle.
Everybody knows where it is, right? Okay.
We are adjourned for today. We'll see you in the morning. Thank you.